Hi, everyone. My name is Sonia Pessoa. I'm the director of the Festival of Bahia. I'm so honored to have these wonderful women here with me tonight. Thank you, Sheila Walker, Vanessa Castaneda, Lori Robson, and Ebony Adams. Thank you guys so much. I want to thank the DC Commission of the Arts and Humanities for sponsoring this event. All my wonderful producer, and also this Farofa de Manhã, which is one of the sponsors. Everybody gonna receive a kit of farofa. I know Sheila has eaten some farinha before. I don't know if you guys have had farinha. I know Ebony too. She has been to Salvador. So yeah, we're gonna have a kit for each one of you guys. So I want to introduce Ebony Adams. She's gonna be the moderator for this panel. She's an author. She is a teacher. She is a mentor, and it's an honor to have her with us. This year, the festival is Empower Women. The theme of the festival is Eyes Iabas. And with that in mind, I wanna let you guys know that women are power, and we are empowered. We are empowering other women. So Ebony, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So welcome everyone to today's panel discussion about cultural history, collaborative efforts, and social activism. And welcome everyone as we continue this incredible Afro-Bahia weekend. This is our panel discussion entitled Cultural History, Collaborative Efforts, and Social Activism. And I am honored to welcome to the virtual stage, Dr. Sheila Walker, Lori Robinson, and Vanessa Castaneda. So sit back, get ready, prepare to be enlightened. And as we begin to kick off, I am pleased to welcome Dr. Sheila Walker, who is a cultural anthropologist, documentary filmmaker, and an author, and the executive director of Afro Diaspora Incorporated, a nonprofit organization that is developing documentary films and educational materials about the global African diaspora. The virtual stage is yours, Dr. Walker.
Thank you so much, Ebony. I'm really thrilled to be here and thrilled to be in such wonderful company for this great opportunity to talk about Afro-Brazilian culture, to talk about Afro-Bahian culture, and to talk about empowered women. Women have, sometimes we have some problems, but I think it's really important for us to have a knowledge of who empowered women were historically, and to have a sense of strong role models to inspire us to perform at our highest ability. And so when I think about talking about empowered women, I like to start at the beginning. I like to start at the beginning of humanity. And I like to start with our great-great-great-grandmothers, who were the first women who gave birth to modern human life. I'm a cultural anthropologist, and I love being a cultural anthropologist because it allows me to travel around the world and get to know what other human beings are doing, to get to know my human family. And I'm a cultural anthropologist essentially because of Chinese people in Chinatown. I'm from New Jersey, and I knew when I was 4 that there was more to the world than Jersey. And my aunt lived in Chinatown in New York, and so we used to visit her, and I saw these different people who spoke a different language and ate different food, and I was fascinated. I was learning how to read and write, and I looked for those words I knew, cat, dog. There's a lot of writing in Chinatown. I couldn't find what I knew. And so I just remained intrigued. And because of Chinatown, I wanted to find out who my other neighbors were on the planet. And I also, at 4, wanted to figure out how I could go visit them. Well, I had to wait quite a while before I was allowed to go any place. But when I was in college, I went to Cameroon in Central Africa as part of a student exchange program and lived with a wonderful family that had absolutely nothing to do with the kinds of primitive stereotypes of Africa. I found myself in the center of a kingdom that was very culturally rich, had wonderful art, a palace, a royal family, you know, the usual things you expect in a kingdom. And so that was my introduction to Africa. The father of the king, when I was there, had created a writing system for his language. He had written books, he had schools, and interestingly, when the French colonized that part of Cameroon, one of the first things they did was close the schools, because having one's own source of knowledge was a threat to the colonizer. And so that kind of formed the way I think about the world and how I think about colonization and oppression and the necessity to tell one's own stories. And I think that we're talking about empowered women. Well, empowered women, we have our own stories to tell too. And I had to go to Cameroon. I needed to go to Africa because I went to an elite women's college, Bryn Mawr, where I was the colored girl in my class. And it wasn't a terrible experience, but I needed a little balance. And I found that balance in Cameroon. And as a result of that first introduction, I haven't visited all the countries in Africa, maybe 40 or so of the 54. I have 2 more to visit in the continental Americas, Guyana and El Salvador. And my issue is now is the global African diaspora. And in college, one of my classmates told me that Negroes, that's who we were back then, have created nothing to humanity. Have contributed, excuse me, nothing to humanity. And so I like to, in talking about what Negroes have contributed to humanity, I like to start with humanity. And so if I may begin to share the screen. You know, when I talk about humanity, I like to talk about the origins of humanity. And one of the things that we all know by now, we should, is that modern humanity began in Africa, so that all humans who live on Earth are of African origin. And my favorite human, well, she's not exactly human, but she's one of our ancestresses, is Lucy, otherwise known as Australopithecus afarensis. So the fact that she's called Australopithecus means that she's not human like us. We're Homo sapiens sapiens, or I think we should be called femina sapiens sapiens, you know, very knowledgeable women. So I like Lucy, or Dinkanesh, as she's called in, I believe, Amharic, the major language of Ethiopia. She's called, "You are marvelous, you are wonderful." And she's 3,200,000 years old. When she was found in the 1970s, she was the oldest fossil found, and she's still, I believe, the most complete. What I especially like about her is that I can visit her. And so I have visited her several times in the museum in Addis Ababa. And what I liked especially about her was when people talked about the origin of man, I liked to be able to say, yes, the original man was a woman. So I want to talk about various themes that are exemplified by females. Royalty, one of the major royal areas, one of the major kingdoms in the past 500 years, the era of the modern world, was the Kingdom of Congo. Its capital, Mbanza Congo, is in what is now Angola. And the best known person from the Congo Kingdom was not one of the Congo kings, but rather this woman, or this representation of this woman, Zinga Mbandi, known as Queen Zinga, who was the queen of Ndongo and Matamba. So she was the queen of 2 queendoms. And what she was most noted for was when the Portuguese were trying to colonize Angola, she fought them off for 4 decades. So she was noted for her resistance to colonization by the Portuguese. And she has become the national heroine of Angola. To my knowledge, there is no national hero. She is the national heroine. So if we go to the Americas, especially if we go to Brazil, one of the things we find are Congo queens. So these images are from Cerro in the state of Minas Gerais, where Congo kings Congo queens, especially queens. The queens are much more important than the kings. The queens are perpetual. The kings are often festive. They're the king for a year. So Brazil, all over Brazil, there are Congo queens, and some of them are called Queen Zinga, like Queen Zinga, whom you just saw. But it's not only in Brazil that there are Congo queens. This is Panama. And this is So what's important to notice is that it's the queen who's the most important. Some of the Congo kings in Panama have said things like, I take orders from the queen. Technology. If we are taught anything about the enslavement of Africans in the Americas, we're given the impression that Africans came to the Americas just as bodies, not as heads, that they brought nothing. Well, that makes no sense. It's illogical, it's absurd, and it's false. It's important to know that Africans were specifically chosen for enslavement in the Americas based on technological knowledge. And one area of this technological knowledge was gold metallurgy. This is people from the Akan Kingdom in Ghana, Ivory Coast. And this is a kingdom noted for its gold. When the Portuguese began to trade with people from this area of the coast, they called it a Costa da Mina, the coast of mines, because of the knowledge of gold metallurgy. And when the Portuguese and Spanish discovered the gold of the indigenous people, who they had largely wiped out within 100 years of the European presence in the Americas, 90% of the indigenous people of the Americas, and I mean from Chile to Canada, had been killed off. So 10% of them remained. So when the Portuguese and Spanish wanted to mine the gold of these indigenous people, they didn't know how to do that. They didn't have that technology. They didn't have that knowledge. So they went to a Costa da Mina, which the British called the Gold Coast. And they brought Africans they called Negros Minas. And here we are in Ecuador. This woman is panning gold in Rio Santiago. In Minas Gerais in Brazil, it was said that having Africans in gold mines brought almost magical luck for finding gold. Luck or expertise? It wasn't just gold, however. People had to eat in the Americas. And so Africans were chosen for their agricultural knowledge. The area from Liberia to Senegal is called the Rice Coast. And Africans, there were posters like this, cotton and rice Negroes, so that ship captains were asked to bring rice Negroes, i.e. experts in the complex agricultural techniques of growing rice. And this kind of rice existed in Brazil, it existed in Suriname, it existed in the United States, and this is African rice, rice domesticated in Africa. It's called Oryza glaberrima. The rice that we think of from Asia is a different rice, Oryza sativa. But I realized that when I thought about these rice growers, I thought about men. So this is an African rice. It was called Carolina Gold, as a matter of fact. And I thought about men planting rice. Well, when I thought about rice fields I'd never seen a man in a rice field. I saw women in rice fields. Men prepared the land, women harvested the rice, they owned the seeds. They knew which seeds were good for which kind of land, which kind of time, and they obviously were the cooks. Resistance. When we think of resistance, we often again think of men, but that's not all true. Jamaica, Nanny. Nanny of the Maroons was one of the major Maroon leaders in Jamaica. And she's on the $500 bill. That's not really $500 in US cents, it's about $5. But so Nanny is known for her role as a Maroon leader. Harriet Tubman. You know, Obama had wanted to put Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill to replace Andrew Jackson, a noted slaver and a noted slayer of indigenous people. But the previous inhabitant of the White House was obviously not having that. But the new inhabitant of the White House apparently is going to go along with this, and we're going to have a bill that may not look exactly like this. It will be a different image of Harriet Tubman, but this woman, and she's from the area, right? She lived in Maryland, and she was noted for freeing people from enslavement and also going with an army regiment to South Carolina, to the Combahee River, to free people from enslavement. And triumph. This is the first African descendant woman who was a candidate for the presidency of the United States, Shirley Chisholm, 1968. So she represents the triumph of all of these resistant women. And when we got our new vice president, Kamala Harris, in January, she wore pearls. Why did she wear pearls? To honor her predecessor, this political woman, Shirley Chisholm. So I think that it's really important for us as African and African descended women to know our stories, to know the kinds of important roles that women played in Africa, first of all, in the beginning of humanity, in Africa resisting colonization, in Africa being the experts in the technologies that developed the Americas, and currently we just have two vice presidents now, Costa Rica, Epsi Campbell and Kamala Harris, but where are we going from now? You know, things are just going to get more and more exciting. And so thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to what everyone else has to say about empowered women. And if I can just figure out how to unshare.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walker. I really appreciate what you shared with us. I love, the ability to tell one story, and we know that is very, very important. It's critical for us to be able to define ourselves and to tell our stories in our voice and from our experience, and that journey leading us through resistance and through triumph. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. Next, I would like to welcome Dr. Lori Robinson, who is the founder and director of Vita Afrolatina. I would like to welcome you to the stage.
First, want to thank Sonia Pessoa. I have attended some of the events of festivals in the past in DC, although I'm in Michigan right now. I was born in DC and raised in Silver Spring, and so I know how valuable this festival is. It's such a gem. The work that you do, Sonia, to connect our diaspora is so important. And so I just want to lift you up and thank you for this, and thank you for the opportunity to participate. It's an honor to collaborate with you. Also, just want to say thank you to all the folks who decide to join us for this panel. I'm really excited to have this conversation. So I'm going to also share my screen. So as you heard, I am the founder and executive director of Vita Afrolatina. We are a new international women's fund. We mobilize resources and connect them with women of African descent in Latin America, specifically women that are addressing sexual violence. And so that can mean that they are providing healing services in their own communities, or that they are creating initiatives to decrease and ultimately eliminate sexual violence. We are working to fill a gap in resources to expand and strengthen the work of Black women in Latin America, who are really, we recognize, experts in their reality and in terms of the subject matter, that the issues that we're addressing in terms of gender-based violence, in terms of sexual violence. They don't need experts to drop in and tell them what to do or what to do with the money that they deserve, that they've been robbed of for 500 years. So we are working to fill a gap in resources and be partners with Black women in Latin America to have the resources necessary to move forward with their own solutions for their own communities. And we know that Black women are disproportionately experiencing poverty in Latin America, including in Brazil. Black women are also suffering from higher levels of violence associated with racism and misogyny. And so all of this can really be traced back to the transatlantic slave trade and just the victimization that has been going on for 5 centuries. The stereotypes that were created, the just systemic racism that continues to perpetuate sexual violence has everything to do with the history of enslavement. And we know that Brazil received the largest number of Africans from the continent, and that Brazil was the last country in the hemisphere to emancipate enslaved people. We know that Black folks are the largest population of African descendant people in the world after Nigeria are in Brazil. And so that we know that despite the shall we say, complications of racial identity in Brazil and other countries in Latin America, more than half of the population now self-identifies as being of African descent in Brazil. So we know that sexual violence disproportionately impacts people of African descent, women of African descent. We know there's a lack of data for many reasons, including the failure of countries around the world to disaggregate data based on race. But even without accounting for race, there's insufficient data to really understand, as well as we need to, sexual violence. But we know that rates of gender-based violence, including sexual violence, have increased during the pandemic, which whenever there's a crisis, this happens. So that's certainly the case now. So I want to, at this point, just have everyone have the opportunity to hear directly from a Black Brazilian woman. This is Benilda Brito, who is one of the leaders of, speaking of Nzinga, Coletivo Nzinga in Belo Horizonte. So she collaborated with us on a fundraising event during which folks tell their own stories. We have Black women telling their own stories of the context of and the realities, the testimonies of how sexual violence is impacting Afro-descendant women in their own countries, in their communities. And so I'm just going to share with you an excerpt that's about just a few minutes long. So please take a listen.
A situação da pandemia, a nossa situação piorou. Aliás, a pirâmide que desenha o rendimento salarial no Brasil é a mesma há muitos anos na história. Quem manda nesse país em termos de rendimento salarial são os homens brancos, depois deles as mulheres brancas, abaixo delas os homens negros, e a base da pirâmide de fome, de miséria, de violência, de subemprego somos nós, mulheres negras. Também somos nós, mulheres negras, que sustentamos esse país e muitas famílias, porque a grande maioria de nós são chefes de famílias. Somos nós que estamos na grande camada das desempregadas, sem acesso à carteira assinada, aos direitos trabalhistas. Mas nós também permanecemos menos tempos desempregadas, porque a gente topa qualquer serviço para manter a família, para manter os filhos. Então, qualquer tipo de emprego, ainda que você tenha uma formação superior, aqui no Brasil nós não temos opções. E a grande maioria de nós está no serviço doméstico sem carteira assinada. Com a pandemia, que infelizmente alastrou, a nossa situação piorou muito, muito. Aqui no Brasil, muitas mulheres que conseguiram o acesso ao mercado de trabalho com carteira assinada perderam seus trabalhos, perderam seu emprego, não tem perspectiva de volta. A fome aqui já está num dado gritante. A cada 2 brasileiros, 1 já está em situação de fome. E a gente tem hoje no Nizinga distribuído cestas básicas, buscado ajuda psicológica, muita gente em depressão, muitos remédios controlados, muita gente tomando remédio de tarja preta, muito alto índice de suicídio. Então, a gente tem dito que se correr, a come pega. Se ficar, o vírus come. Infelizmente, é um ditado que o país tem reproduzido, porque mais do que medo hoje do vírus, nós também estamos com muito, muito medo da fome. E a gente percebe a cada grito pedido de socorro. Infelizmente, o Nizinga hoje não tem nenhum projeto que nos sustente para ficar por conta desse trabalho. Nós todos trabalhamos em outros lugares, tentamos garantir os nossos salários, porque nós também chefiamos famílias e temos muitos dependentes, nós do Nizinga. A gente tem tentado ajudar de várias formas, mas cada dia é mais gritante o tanto de pessoas que nos procuram. Como o Nizinga está em Minas Gerais, aqui um dos estados do Brasil, na cidade de Belo Horizonte, Minas Gerais tem 853 municípios. É uma diversidade dentro do estado. E aqui as nossas maiores demandas são, com a pandemia, o desemprego, a fome, a miséria, a falta de perspectiva, muitas mulheres estão dentro de casa. E ainda que o feminicídio seja um crime, ainda que ele seja condenado, o agressor tenha que pagar pela sua violência, muitos não são, têm certeza da impunidade. Muitos tendo certeza da impunidade, eles partem para a violência, seja violência física, seja violência psicológica, a violência sexual ou os danos materiais. Lamentavelmente, esses números têm crescido. E a grande camada dessas mulheres que estão sofrendo violência sexual são de mulheres negras. Em 1997, o Nizinga já fazia essa pesquisa. Nós anexamos ao boletim de ocorrência da Delegacia Especializada de Crimes contra a Mulher um formulário perguntando a cor dessas mulheres, a religião. E a gente constatou, desde então, que a grande maioria das mulheres que denunciam a violência são mulheres negras. E esse quadro permanece e cresceu com a pandemia. Para além de enfrentar a fome, a gente tem lidado com um agressor que está dentro da casa. O lar, que deveria ser um lugar de proteção, é um dos grandes lugares de ameaça dessas mulheres. Então, muitas sofrendo violência das mais variadas formas. E a violência sexual, porque muitas acreditam que o fato de ser esposa ou de ser companheira, o companheiro tem direito no seu corpo de te tocar da forma que quer, na hora que quer, com os objetos que quiserem. Muitas ainda se submetem ou vivem a esse estupro consentido, que não é consentido, não tem consentimento. Mas o medo de falar, e mais ainda de denunciar, porque a polícia não tem ido aos chamados da violência. A polícia não tem ido atender as mulheres sem denunciadas. Pelo contrário, a violência nas favelas, nas periferias, aumentou 70%.
So that, I just thought it was really important to include voices of women who are working in the context right now. And so what we do know is that philanthropy is failing Black people. Absolutely. And so as you can see from these statistics, less than 3% of grant funding from US foundations, from funders globally, human rights funders, less than 3% are explicitly earmarked for people of African descent throughout Latin America. We know that 1/3 of the population of Latin America are people of African descent, and that they experience far higher rates of poverty than other populations. So that's 33% of the population, but only 3% of folks are designated to receive this grant funding. And in Brazil, domestically, philanthropy looks pretty much the same. So this survey of Brazilian funders showed that, again, more than 50% of the population in Brazil is people of African descent. We know that 1 out of 3, and that's a conservative figure because we don't know how many women and girls are not disclosing sexual violence. So 1 out of 3 women and girls are victims of gender-based violence and sexual violence. Only 4% of the funding within Brazil is going towards addressing women and girls issues. We know that more than 50% of the population in Brazil is Afro-Brazilian. Less than 2% of Brazil's philanthropic dollars are going to Afro-descendants. So again, we are working to begin to address, and I do want to say there is a philanthropic institution in Brazil now called Fundo Baobá. It's the only national funder in Brazil that has the mission of moving philanthropic dollars to Black organizations domestically in Brazil. It's led by 2 women, 2 Black women. So that's a wonderful thing, not nearly enough. So philanthropy sector, we have to step it up. So I'm with the creation of Vita Afrolatina, we've just been able to do our first round of funding, very modest amount of funding, only 4 organizations funded so far, and we're just looking to grow. But among these first grantee partners is Revista Afirmativa. And so you can see bottom right, this is led by 2 young Afro-Brazilian women in their 20s. And so I'd like to just show you a brief, even more brief than the first video, a video from one of the founders who can explain what her organization does in terms of solutions. So this is just 3 minutes.
Meu nome é Alane Reis, eu sou jornalista da revista Afirmativa, coletivo de mídia negra, que é um coletivo que atua entre várias frentes. O nosso carro-chefe é a produção de um portal de notícia e de uma revista impressa, que tem o nome Revista Afirmativa, mas para além disso a gente também trabalha com ações junto ao movimento social, principalmente ao movimento negro, de mulheres negras e de juventude negra, no sentido de pautar o direito à comunicação dentro desses movimentos. A afirmativa está no nosso campo de vida, de prioridade, tem influenciado tudo que a gente tem feito, tanto na perspectiva profissional, como militante, como acadêmica, mas a gente dedica a esse projeto o tempo que cabe nas nossas vidas, diante de sermos esses sujeitos, jovens, negras e negros, que precisam se sustentar, que tem uma série de prioridades e uma série de atividades, digamos assim. Uma coisa que a gente dialoga muito é como a gente faz frente aos discursos criminalizadores, aos discursos sexistas, aos discursos que tentam mesmo apagar a nossa humanidade enquanto pessoas negras. E aí a gente tem feito uma série de coisas, assim, que é produzir outras perspectivas do que a gente quiser falar. Assim. A gente pensa que essa perspectiva do debate da segurança pública, do genocídio, é uma prioridade, para a gente, no sentido de que a gente precisa mesmo fazer frente a esse discurso de legitimação de nossas mortes, mas a gente acredita também que é político demais contar as nossas histórias de resistência, as nossas histórias de felicidade, as nossas histórias de bem viver, de como é que a coletividade consegue trazer outras perspectivas, sobretudo para a juventude negra, que a gente consiga externar o discurso que o racismo, por mais que atravesse nossa vida, ele não pode determinar. A gente pode fazer o que a gente quiser, e a gente tem uma linha muito forte disso, assim, de trazer qual é a diversidade. Não se pode falar em população negra, somos populações, não se pode falar em juventude, somos juventudes.
So just to share, this is my last comment here, just to share that the project that this organization is doing, Vita Afrolatina, they are doing their own call for proposals, and they will select 15 journalists and filmmakers, students and professionals to create content examining gender-based violence and sexual violence against Black women. And they will do this in order to educate the public and just take up where general market media is left off, and just bring to light the truth of the circumstances of violence against Black women. And so there are several, with the technology, several young Black women who are creating independent, not several, there are many, who are creating independent media and doing this very important journalism. We received 9 proposals from our first grant round from Black-led women's organizations in Brazil, proposing various types of projects and interventions. So I can certainly attest to the fact that, not that you needed me for this, but that Black women are, even in the midst of this tragic pandemic, still using their intelligence, their creativity to create change, to heal, to transform their communities and ultimately the country and, you know, all of the Americas. So I just will end with saying, I think that we have a lot to be excited about when it comes to the power of women, Black women in Brazil, and how folks are leveraging their power, their skills, their spirits to create change. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Lori, for educating us and raising our awareness level in regard to sexual violence, and not just focusing on the problem, but also giving us some good information about ways that we can get involved, and showing us how other people in Brazil are tackling this issue. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Next to the virtual stage, I'd like to welcome Vanessa Castaneda. Vanessa is a PhD candidate in Latina American Studies at Tulane University. Her research is done with the Association of Bahian de Acarajé in Brazil. Vanessa, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, Ebony, and thank you to Dr. Walker and to Lori. Your presentations were amazing. So very hard act to follow, but I will try. I'm gonna just share my screen. Let's see. Okay, perfect. You can see this okay? Okay, let me start this from this beginning. Okay, and I will minimize this. Okay, so traditional and political, a reconceptualization of Brazil's Baiana de Acarajé. First, I want to, oh no. Okay, So first, I just want to quickly introduce myself. I'm Vanessa Castañeda, a PhD candidate in Latin American Studies at Tulane. I am the first in my family to attend college. My parents are immigrants from Mexico, and I carry out interdisciplinary research, including ethnographic fieldwork, oral histories, and archival work. And I've been carrying out research with Bahianas, which I will introduce in just a second, and their grassroots association, the National Association of Bahianas, or ABAM, that's how I'll refer to them from here on out, since 2013. So I've accumulated about 18 months of ethnographic fieldwork. And also I wanna thank Sonia Pessoa for this amazing opportunity, and Ken Dassar for just kind of throwing my name in the hat. And thank you again, ladies, for creating this space and for collaborating. And I look forward to future collaborations. And so I'm gonna just introduce who the Bahianas are. So there are multiple meanings. The most nominal is any woman from Bahia, but there's three more symbolic meanings. And so I'm gonna focus on the second, which is the Baiana Jacaraje, usually a woman street vendor, usually Afro-descendant, who sells black-eyed pea fritters, so black-eyed peas that are mashed into this kind of oval ball that's fried in palm oil, which palm oil comes from West Africa. And so these are the women that I'm going to kind of focus on for this presentation. But Bahianas are also women, often senior, often Afro-descendant, who practice and normally have a certain hierarchical ranking within the Afro-diasporic religion of Candomblé. And so Candomblé is an Afro-diasporic religion of ancestral reverence practiced in Brazil, originating from various ethno-linguistic regions in Africa, in which practitioners worship saints, or sometimes they're referred to as deities or orishas that belong to one's nation or cult. And so usually these religious temples are called temples or houses or terreiros. So I might use one of those terms interchangeably, just so you know. And then lastly, this Bahiana is actually the most understood. Usually Bahianas de receptivo are women that are also of Afro descent. They're generally older women, and they're hired to attend festivals or events with varying responsibilities, like carrying out lavagens, which is kind of like a blessing that's connected to Candomblé, or to lead processions for lots of the different festivals that happen in Bahia. So I'm not going to talk about these women because of the time limit. So I'm going to focus on the Baiana Jacaraje. And it is important to note that there are men that sell Acarajé, there are non-Black Baiana Jacaraje, but largely it continues to be a profession done by older Black women. And this is obviously the way that the profession originated, which I will get to in just a second. And I just want to show a photo. So usually Baiana Jacaraje wear very similar attire, this kind of garb. The head wrap, usually a loose, either lace or cotton blouse, a long skirt. Sometimes they will wear the beaded long necklaces, which have a religious signification in Candomblé. And this woman is holding a bowl of acarajé. So the acarajé are those kind of fried fritters that look similar to falafel, for anyone that doesn't know what acarajé is. And generally when you buy acarajé on the street, you then have it filled. So they slice it open and they fill it with several fillings, which I will show you in a second. And another important thing to note is that Baiana Jacaraje you can differentiate Baiana Jacaraje from other street vendors, on the one hand because of the kind of dress that they wear, and on the other hand because they still use a tabuleiro, which is a wooden table. So this is something that is intentional. It's something that happened centuries ago or in the 19th century when this livelihood started, which I will talk about in a second. And so these kind of markers are really important to know when we're talking about the livelihood of the Baiana Jacaraje. And so my main argument is Baiana Jacaraje are often referred to as the postcards of Brazil for their emblematic association to African tradition and heritage. And they sell typical Bahian foods, including the acarajé, which are still very sacred in Afro-diasporic religious ceremonies. They're very ubiquitously found within the streets and beaches and squares of Salvador and events and airports and all kinds of spaces. But official and popular discourses portray Bahianas as cultural icons of the region and nation, and often render them as apolitical cultural stewards of African heritage. And so what I argue is that they are cultural icons and they're also political subjects. And my larger work, my dissertation, goes into this more historically, but here I want to just give 3 examples. And I do want to note that I carry out my research with Bahianas that have some level of affiliation with ABAM. So I don't claim to represent all Bahianas in Salvador, because there's literally, I would say, about 4,000 or so. There hasn't been an actual systemic kind of cataloging of how many Bahianas exist, but there are thousands. And so I do most of my work with Bahianas that are in some level affiliated with ABAM. And so here are just 2 photos. This is Tachi on the left, and this is Vilma on the right. This was at the Festival Jacaraje in 2019. So sometimes Bahianas aren't always as dressed up because obviously it's really hot in Salvador. But this was a festival. It looked beautiful. If you see here on the left, Tachi is filling one of the acaraje. She's slicing it open, and Vilma in red is getting the acaraje prepared as a little ball to fry. And then the next photo, this is Mirasi. She sells in this historic center. Her mother was also a Bahiana jacaraje. You see the wooden table. This is the tabuleiro that I was just mentioning. And then you see the large bowl of the boiling dendé or palm oil. And then you see the acaraje that's frying there. And then on the right, you will see the tabuleiro with the foods. So you have dried shrimp. You have an okra stew, which is called caruru. You have on the right lower corner vatapa, which is kind of like this ginger puree with cashews and dried shrimp. And then you have a few other items that I won't get into because of time, but of course, if you have any questions, let me know. Oh, yes, and then of course I had to show you an up-close photo of acaraje. So on the left, you have an acaraje with the vatapa, with the caruru, with the dried shrimp, and with salada, which is the newest addition. In the center, you actually have acara. So this is a sacred offering that is offered to, I believe it's Iasan or Shango, but I'm not entirely sure. And I will talk about them in just a second. But this is a larger acaraje with 7 shrimp that is used as an offering. So it's very sacred. And then on the right, you have just a pot of frying acaraje. So just to kind of give you a visual. Okay, so before I discuss my 3 examples, though, I do want to just kind of historicize one part of the livelihood of the Bahiana jacaraje. And Dr. Walker, I appreciated you kind of saying, you know, it's important to recognize the humanity of Africans and not try to begin, and I know you didn't say this exactly, but not try to begin Black history as something that started with slavery. And so I don't intend to do that at all. I did want to highlight this one example because I think it's important in illustrating this history of resistance that Bahianas jacaraje have been doing for centuries. And so the profession of the Bahiana jacaraje began during slavery in Brazil in the 19th century. And escravas de ganho or ganhadeiras was the name that they kind of had before they became Bahiana jacaraje, the cultural icon and street vendor. And so these women sold acaraje as part of their religious obligations to their Afro-diasporic temples. And so I think, or I advocate that the histories of Bahiana should be reframed because they are the cornerstone of Black liberation in Bahia for their commitment to self and collective liberation and their historic ongoing commitment to the maintenance of Afro-diasporic religions. And so what I mean here is that Salvador was the first capital of Brazil until 1763 when it got moved to Rio. And it was a very highly urbanized center. And so one of the systems of slavery in place was the system of ganho, which basically means an enslaved person was able to generate their own income as long as they gave this previously stipulated amount to their enslaver either on a daily or weekly basis. And then they were able to keep the rest of that money. And so ganhadeiras during that time did this ganho work. And in the 19th century, women who were the filhas de Yinsan, which means the daughters of the goddess of Yinsan, which is the goddess of the wind, were able to vend the sacred food of acaraje. And so these women in the 19th century were selling these foods on the streets, were giving the stipulated amount to their enslaver and were keeping the rest. And they were using those profits to then purchase the freedom for themselves and for their children and for their families. And so ganhadeiras, escravos de ganho, all these precursors to the baianas are the women who peddled and who bought and purchased the freedom of their family members and of other Africans and African descendants Bahians. And also, they are the ones who maintained the religious centers. They are the ones who continued to also pay a certain amount of money to maintain candomblé as an institutional thriving religion that exists today. So I do think it's important to just kind of historicize the way that this history, this legacy of resistance has been happening since slavery. Okay, so now we'll kind of move more into my contemporary work. So the founding of the Association of Baianas, ABAM, was in 1992. Clarice dos Anjos founded ABAM. At this point, it was ABA. And so at this point in 1992, Baianas had already become a central icon of the regional and national imaginary. So tourism was beginning to develop in Salvador around the 1960s, which first it began kind of like a domestic economic sector, and then it grew into more international sector more in like the 80s. And it's also important to kind of contextualize that candomblé had been repressed for centuries. And finally in 1976, it was recognized as legitimate religion. Obviously it was a legitimate religion, but now it was no longer seen, at least legally, as folklore. And so just kind of important to contextualize this. And I think this really speaks to a point that Lori was bringing up about the need for Black women to represent themselves, because Baianas Jacaraje had always been regulated in terms of what they wear, their permits, how they can sell their foods, etc. And so at this point, now Baianas, now Black women, now Clarice, who was a daughter of a Baiana Jacaraje, is establishing a formal association to be able to advocate, to be able to as an insider, work in these formal political realms on behalf of the Baianas. And so I just to kind of contextualize, in 1939, you have Carmen Miranda, who sang the song O Que Que a Baiana Tem, which was written by Dorival Caymmi. So she became, this international Brazilian bombshell. And she ended up really internationalizing a very specific image of the Baiana, which is based on exoticism and paradise and racial mixture. And it is precisely because of her white skin that she was able to kind of emulate, right, a Black identity and a Black profession on an international stage. And she did it in a very kind of caricaturized, exotic way. But just, I'm bringing this up just to give you an idea of how present the image of the Baiana was already before the founding of the association. And so in 1942, you see that O Cruzeiro, which is a magazine that was widely read by middle class and upper class Brazilians all over, you see the Baianas on the cover. These last two images are postcards. They're undated, but I am assuming they're probably from the 70s or 80s. And so you see that Baianas are now on the postcards. So the image is now not so much being based on the kind of stylized image that Carmen Miranda had disseminated. Now it's more of a kind of popular image of Black women street vendors. So you see that the Baiana Jacaraje street vendor as this cultural icon of the region and nation is already kind of a global phenomenon. Okay, so the Associação das Baianas. Clarice dos Anjos, daughter and granddaughter of a Baiana Jacaraje, began administering the grassroots ad hoc association from her home in Itapuã, which is a peripheral neighborhood of Salvador. As a little girl, she accompanied her mother at the tabuleiro, and she grew up seeing firsthand the difficulties and lack of support and recognition from the public powers for these women, despite being globally recognized as Brazilian cultural icons. Okay. And so when she founded the association, there were three main objectives: professionalization, so a focus on health and hygiene, customer service, financial literacy, and proper food handling. So Clarice really wanted Baianas de Acarajé to be seen as professionals, to be seen as this is a legitimate livelihood where women are trained properly, where they can actually demonstrate that they have a certificate. So really working on professionalizing this livelihood that's often been seen as informal. Also advocacy, serving as a body that represents the Baianas and meets with different arms of the local government and politicians to enact legal changes. So at this point, although Baianas de Acarajé were very omnipresent and were also kind of expected to be within the physical and cultural landscape of the city and region, they were still in very precarious situations, and they still arguably are today, honestly. And so establishing this association to be able to advocate for them within the traditional political realm of the public powers. And then self-sufficiency was a third objective, where the association collaborated with various institutions to show Baianas how to sew their own clothing, for example, to be able to know financial literacy so they didn't have to depend on outside knowledge or other institutions. Okay. And so now it's important to recognize that ABAM is a national association. So even though it started within Clarice's home, it's now an association that has its headquarters in Salvador, but there are branches in Rio, there are branches in Sao Paulo, Fortaleza. So there is this nation level coalition building amongst the Baianas. And so besides these three aforementioned objectives, I wanted to talk about two more examples. And the first of which is that Baianas, or the craft of the Baianas de Acarajé, has been recognized as official cultural heritage of the nation. So in 2002, the Association of Baianas created an alliance with CEAU, which is the Center of Afro-Oriental Studies. I'm sorry, I have so many typos. That is part of the Federal University of Bahia and the highly respected Terreiro Ileache Opofonja. And so they led a procession to the federal branch entrusted with cultural safeguarding IFAN and handed over a proposal to recognize Acarajé as patrimony of the nation. So in 2005, the craft of the Baianas de Acarajé was recognized, and it was one of the first group of people considered to, they were written in the Book of Knowledge, and they're considered to be cultural heritage, cultural tradition, immaterial patrimony of the nation that is deserving of preservation and protection under the federal government. And so I conducted oral interviews with the previous presidents of the association who were leading the association during this time. And they shared with me that the reason that they did this was because they felt that the recipe and the religious association of the food, which, as I said before, is connected to candomblé, were being threatened. Also, in addition to that, they felt that if the craft of the Baianas de Acarajé became recognized as such, obviously this would have really positive benefits in terms of workers' rights, in terms of just self-esteem, in terms of being proud and having integrity for one's profession. And so to just kind of contextualize a bit, in 1937, Brazil began preserving and safeguarding physical landmarks, so architectural structures, so churches, parks, those kinds of patrimony, which is known as material patrimony. So in 2000, IFAN passed a decree making this new legislation that's immaterial patrimony. So this is incredibly new. This is an incredibly new concept and an incredibly new legislation that the Baianas created an alliance with an institution, a highly respected institution, UFBA, and a highly respected Candomblé Terreiro to advocate for their inclusion to be seen or to be recognized as official cultural patrimony. Lastly, my third example, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm not there yet. And so in 2013, the association organized a national conference with the overarching theme, Safeguarding Spaces and Trajectories for the Craft of Baianas de Acarajé. So Baianas from Salvador and outside of Salvador were present, along with IFAN agents, so government workers, along with religious leaders from various candomblé houses, activists, and they came together to talk about, besides topics like racism and religious intolerance and domestic violence, which are incredibly important to talk about within all populations, but particularly, like Lori was saying, within Black women's spaces. They also wanted to talk about what does it mean to be cultural patrimony, and how do we hold the federal government accountable to safeguard and protect us. And so I am really underscoring that this conference served as a space for Bahianas to participate in their own identity making as cultural patrimony, and to stake a claim in the expectations and demands that they should be receiving from the federal government under safeguarding policies. And so after this, I think it was a 3-day conference, they published a 66-page book that they delivered to IFAN, which is the National Institute of Historic and Artistic Patrimony with the federal government, to communicate their expectations for safeguarding measures and for protections. And so my last example, to kind of underscore the political determinism of the Bahianas Jacaraje, is that Bahianas are the first street vendors to successfully demand and obtain the right to sell their local fritters during World Cup games. This has never been done before. And so just a few photos to kind of show what was happening. This is one of the times that they were organizing and protesting. They were all wearing the white garb, which is normally something that they would wear at a very sacred or well-known street festival. And they were giving a caraje to people on the streets and just having people sign petitions to be able to request and demand that they should be included to be able to sell their fritters during the World Cup games, because they had been, Bahianas had been selling food in the arena and outside of the arena for decades, if not more than a century. So after 8 months of organized protests, where Bahianas, through ABAM, mobilized together to demand their inclusion to sell the beloved fritters during the mega sporting event, they cited their historical and cultural importance as official recognized patrimony of the state and region. So they garnered sufficient local and international support from Bahian civil society and from global activist platforms like change.org to become the first street vendors in the history of FIFA to obtain the right to sell their traditional foods. So this accomplishment was the result of a recent and highly visible struggle that amassed over 17,000 signatures, which the president of ABAM, Hita Santos, personally delivered to José Claudinor, who was a close aide of then President Gilmar. And one thing that I did want to just point out is that Hita literally printed all 17,000 signatures. So it was a stack of papers just to physically show the tangible support that the Bahianas had garnered from all over the world. And so I think this is really an important thing to highlight, because FIFA is this multinational imperial force, and the Bahianas Jacaraje were able to mobilize their status as official patrimony of the nation, and were able to argue and build a coalition strong enough both locally and globally to have FIFA concede to their demands. And so I really think this is another incredible moment to highlight about the power that make these Bahianas Jacaraje, that make these Black women political subjects. And so in this brief presentation, I highlighted the multifacetedness of Bahianas, complicating the narrative imposed onto them as timeless folkloric figures of African authenticity, because oftentimes, wrongly so, the way that like the tourism industry or the way that official discourses even conceptualize Africa is as something that's in the past, something that's, you know, folkloric, and that's not true. And so the ways that Bahianas are supposed to be representatives of that, they are also seen as in the past. They're not seen as modern subjects who also have political capabilities. And so I just cite the 3 examples here about the association, the alliance that they created to be able to demand being recognized as official patrimony, and then lastly, their successful confrontation with FIFA. And so that is it. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Obrigada, thank you. Thank you, Vanessa.
Let me stop sharing the screen. I tried not to go too long. Here we go.
Wow. Absolutely amazing, amazing. For everyone watching, you have just witnessed history. I cannot say enough about all of the gems that were just dropped. So before we move into our next section, I would just like to thank each of you for sharing your work with us and giving us a glimpse into the history and the activism and the collaboration of Afro-Brazilian women from our own eyes, from your eyes, told from your hearts. And so I'd like to take a few moments, and deepen the dialogue for our viewers. If you'd like, I know you guys are ready for some questions and answers. And I'm going to start with Dr. Sheila Walker. So in your presentation, you spoke of the importance of telling our own stories. And so I'm curious if there is a story that is of significant importance that comes to mind in terms of for African descended women.
Well, when, let's see, I was trying to think of stories that had struck me. And one is from a short story, I believe, that I did not read, by Bessie Head, a colored South African writer. So coloreds were people who were not the Africans, they were not white, they were that intermediary category. And Bessie Head is, I believe, the best known writer of that category. And in the story, a woman is in her village, someplace in South Africa, and the police come and they get her and they take her away. So the reader doesn't know why. And then they put her in jail, and she's in a jail cell with lots of other women, and they don't talk to her. And so there she is, and she doesn't dare to talk to them because they're not talking to her. And so after a few days, one of them says to her, "So why did you kill your husband?" Because they were all there for the same reason, and they knew it, and they knew why she was there. But the deal was, you know, they were women who were objecting to the kind of sexual violence to which they were subjected. And so there was a whole category of these women who said, mess with me one more time, and I may go to jail, but there are going to be a whole lot of us in jail for exactly the same thing. And so, you know, I'm not unsympathetic to the issue of violence against women. I'm not unaware. But I also think it's important for us to have other kinds of models that we can use as a counterweight to that, and to have models of female power. I went to a market in Lagos in Nigeria, and it was the market was just sort of spectacularly well organized, and it was really clean. And there was a school for the kids of the market women. And so one of the women who worked there found it necessary to tell us how that happened, because this was an extraordinarily well organized, well taken care of market. And apparently the market women had noted that their market was not clean, and that it was difficult to be a market woman. And so they went to the city council and said to those men at the city council, "Can you come and please clean our market and maybe, you know, organize it better, and, you know, maybe a school for our kids?" And the men said, "Yes, soon come. Yeah, we'll be there." All right. So then the women went again. This time they were a little more organized, a little more insistent. And the men said, "Yes, yes, yes, we'll come and take care of it." Then they went a third time and they said, "Do you want to eat?" Because what they had become aware of was that they were the people in charge of the distribution of food. So if those men wanted to eat, they had to clean up the market, create a school for the kids of those women. And so what those women were doing were organizing to assert their very real power. So I think sometimes, you know, in the Americas, we're given the impression that these African women were just passive. Wow, you know, I just don't think that's true. And if we look at models of, I mean, some, you know, there were what, over 2,000 ethnic groups in Africa. So maybe there are probably 2,000 models for women. But one of the effects of colonization in Africa was to impose European patriarchy and to disempower women whose grandmothers had greater power, and who thought that perhaps their daughters could get involved in the European system and reacquire the kind of powers that their grandmothers had had. So I think that we need to think of what are our possible models. So I cited from Africa, Queen Zinga. It's not just Queen Zinga, there are others named African queens who said no to European colonization. Yasantua, Ghana, okay, Ashanti. There's a film called Sahaunya about queens in the Sahel who said no to the European colonial expeditions. So, we need to know a little. I'm interested in our knowing more of our stories so that we have models of women like Nanny of the Maroons, like Harriet Tubman, who said, no, we're not tolerating this. I was struck by the tray. Now, I love acarajé. And in Martinique, where I have seen similar phenomena, they have what they call tray, a tray. And so that whole African descendant women selling cooked food in the street is a pan-diasporan phenomenon. The person who wrote about Afro-Mexicans, Aguirre Beltran, wrote about Afro-Mexican women on the Pacific coast selling cooked food in the street. So there's a larger model there. I think in Philadelphia, African descendant women sold cooked food in the street, Nova Scotia in Canada. So there's a model, but those women, they had money. I mean, you talked about, for example, they could fund things. And I read an article about women selling cooked food in the street, and I think someplace like Goiás, who funded the mutual aid societies, the Irmandades, they funded all kinds of things because they were able to accumulate money. I also thought about, what's her name, Carmen Miranda, creating that image, essentially appropriating the image of the Baiana de Acarajé. She was not even Brazilian, she was European, she was Portuguese. And I also thought about today. And, all those nice images of the protection of the Baianas being acknowledged as part of the World Historical Patrimony by UNESCO. I just saw a horrible presentation a couple of weeks ago about all the religious violence that's going on vis-a-vis Candomblé, vis-a-vis the Tejeros, and I would imagine some of those Baianas are subject to it. And I was really impressed by the kind of coalitions that had been so impactful, like the Baianas with Ileache Opoafanja, which was, when I did my research there, the most progressive of the Candomblé Tejeros. Well, now there's a monument to my Stella, the priestess, that has been, defaced by those people who are perpetuating racist violence against religion of African origin. So I was, first of all, I thought both of your presentations were fascinating and I learned so much. And tomorrow, interestingly enough, is 3 de Maio, no? The abolition, the day of abolition, when Princess Isabel signed the Lei Áurea, the golden law emancipating Afro-Brazilians. And I believe that when there was the first in 1988, right? 100 years after the last emancipation in the Americas, Afro-Brazilians called it 100 anos sem emancipação, making a play on words. Sem, C-E-M, 100 years, sem, without S-E-M, emancipation. And so I think that tomorrow is going to be kind of a hot celebration or commemoration of 100 anos sem emancipação.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I love that you brought back the women who are cooking the foods throughout the diaspora. Yeah. And Vanessa, I really appreciate the frame that you set in referencing Oya Yansa and the Baianas de Acarajé, because when women advocate in political ways, and especially in the marketplace, it is often in association with the sacred. And so in that context, I'd just like to ask you, what do you see as the possibilities for African descended women in Brazil?
Thank you for your question. And also, I just wanted to note, you have baianas on in your painting in the background.
I do, absolutely. My life.
I first saw it and I was like, oh, this is perfect. Well, so in terms of kind of seeing what the possibilities are for Afro-descended women in Brazil, I mean, I think that's a huge question. But I think one of the things that I've been seeing recently is really maximizing access to virtual spaces. I think that in particular, I remember speaking with some friends who were always talking about kind of like the limited access to being able to read certain scholarship in Brazil because publishing houses are more scarce than, for example, the United States. And so I saw, and I think that that's obviously changing a lot with access to internet and being able to disseminate PDFs, but not just PDFs of actual written scholarship, but I think also using these platforms like Instagram and TikTok and YouTube especially. Lots of Black women are advocating in Brazil, are advocating for other Black Brazilian women to read or to understand and learn from other Black feminists in Brazil. And I don't think it's with the intent to create divisions, but I think it's also with this goal in mind of kind of creating transnational solidarity, but also inserting the Global South as an active participant who is also a knowledge producer. And so I see lots of channels where Black Brazilian women are saying, let's read Sueli Carneiro, let's read Beatriz Nascimento, Djamila Ribeiro, because Black Brazilian women also should be listened to, kind of like I think both Lori and Dr. Walker were saying, like it's important for you to be able to tell your own story, to be able to create your own narratives, to be able to bring forth your own knowledge. And so I see that's something that's really happening a lot. And I think it's important to kind of see the ways that knowledge production has been asymmetrical. While having a transnational solidarity movement of different Black feminisms, also kind of having this more horizontal knowledge exchange, I think is something that's really important and something that's really happening right now. In terms of the Baianas in particular, I think that the pandemic has been terrible in many ways, particularly because the livelihood of a Baiana Jacarajé is very precarious. And so with the pandemic, closing access to the street has decimated their already kind of precarious livelihoods to a certain degree that was really unexpected. But one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of these women who were older, who weren't really active in virtual spaces or on social media, have learned very quickly how to navigate WhatsApp or Zoom or Instagram or whatever. And all of these different branches of the Association of Baianas have been in dialogue about how to organize, about how to have different kind of popular education spaces online about different subject matters. And what Dr. Walker was just saying, there's been so many spaces about religious intolerance. There's been so many spaces where we have to talk about the real physical and emotional violence that is happening from the conservative evangelicals. And obviously not all evangelicals, but from the very conservative hegemonic evangelical movement. And so there's been so many spaces where these older women are showing up, are learning, are active, are organizing. And so that's one that's more specific to the Baianas.
Thank you. I love that. And as you speak about access to virtual spaces and knowledge transfer, it also reminds me of, in the past year or so, a lot of cross-pollination, if you will, of knowledge between Afro-Brazilian women and African-American women here in the States. And a lot of that has been because of access to these virtual spaces. So in that context, Lori, I'd like to know your thoughts on how Afro-Brazilian and African-American women can work together to empower each other.
I think that there's just so much, well, first of all, let's say that has been happening. It's not widely known, but for Angela Davis is always in Brazil. Other Black feminists are going to Brazil. I feel like there's so many African Americans, feminist women studying and working in Brazil and vice versa. We've been able to, I've just come across more and more Afro-Brazilian women who are studying. And so just developing in the United States. So just developing relationships on a personal basis, I think is really important, just to be able to get to know people and build trust and understand each other's cultures and all of that. So I think you know, everyone's tired of Zoom, but we also, as has been said, have to recognize how this pandemic, a silver lining of this pandemic is that it has forced people to get still, as Sheila said earlier, get creative and figure out what are the that I can make in this moment. How can I expand whatever my work is in this moment from my home? So I just think a lot of that is happening. I guess I would just say, generally speaking, in any kind of field where, you know, the environmental movement, land rights, like these are movements, not just like sisterhood across borders, not just Brazil, the United States, but Colombia, I mean, anywhere in the Americas, like we just know that we have the same problems or similar versions of problems because of the same reasons: white supremacy, patriarchy, the same corporations, the you know, the global nature of right-wing politics. So we're experiencing the same things for the same reasons, perhaps to different degrees. So I just think it's, in that regard, it is an exciting time where we're like, even in terms of political, like electoral politics, to see how, I know that there have been conversations about how after the assassination of Marielle, all of these Black women in Brazil ran for office and won, and so we're learning from each other. And so I would just encourage anyone, any Black woman, anywhere, wherever you are, like whatever your field is, just figure out how to start making connections now. Like, don't wait until we can travel again. You know, there's this thing called the internet. So whatever you do in your context, you can find a counterpart that does that in Brazil, as well as other countries in the Americas. And we can be reading together, having book discussions, we can be creating businesses together. I mean, I just think the sky's the limit. So I just would encourage everyone that's listening, whatever your interest is, whatever your sector is, your professional sector, whatever your cultural passion is, take it upon yourself to start, if you haven't already, make those connections there. You know, this is like fertile time for these kinds of relationships to blossom.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Dr. Walker. This has been quite an enlightening and empowering discussion, and one that I hope continues for a long time to come. Thank you to Sonia with Afro Bahia Festival for creating this opportunity to elevate the discussion about Afro-Brazilian women, women's empowerment, and the opportunity for us to tell our stories, And to you, the audience, thank you for joining. I invite all of you to find a way to make a difference. find a way to make a difference. Enjoy the rest of the Afro Bahia Festival. Thank you again.
Thank you all for participating. This is a wonderful, wonderful event. Right now, I feel like eating acarajé after leaving.
I know.
I like to have acarajé dough in the house. So maybe one day Dr. Sheila can invite us to her house and we can make some acarajé.
Yes. Ooh, I love it.
Yes.
I will be home in a week. So and I'll be moving back to Maryland in August. So I'm ready.
Okay.
We're gonna talk and we're gonna do that. So thank you everybody for participating. After to close the evening, we're gonna show a beautiful Yoruba story called História de Yalodê. The History of Yalodê is a storytelling by Professora Wanda Machado. It is in Portuguese with English subtitles. So I hope you guys enjoy this story because it's also about the power of women and the power of Oshun, the power of possuation of women. So it's a very beautiful storytelling. Thank you all. Hi everyone, I want to welcome this beautiful and powerful women who is going to be part of the panel Art as a Form for Women, Upliftment and Empowerment. Welcome you all. We have Jira Tompkins, a former Bob Marley producer, Janua Moja, a designer and an artist, Marley Paris, Batalá de Si, percussionist, Rafaela Silva, intuitive business coach and dancer. Demetrius Hell, a dancer and a percussionist. Negra Jo, a hairstylist and a dancer. Welcome all. So again, my name is Sonia Pessoa, for those who hasn't met me yet. I'm the director of Festival Afro Bahia. I've been doing this festival for the past 9 years. It's my baby. I always say, since I'm not a mother, the festival is my child. It's been a long way. I have learned a lot. Doing a festival like that, bringing people from Salvador to DC with very little financial resources has been very challenging. But I get to the point that more people start to help and believe. I want to thank the Art Commission, DC Art Commission, the Art and Humanity, for sponsoring these events. This is the second year the festival is sponsored by the DC Commission of Arts, and I'm very thankful for that. I also have other sponsors, like the Brazilian Embassy, Batalá, DC, a Bloco da Capoeira, with Mestre Tom Matéria, Farofa de Manhã, and I want to tell everyone who participated, they're going to receive a kit of farofa. I guess you all know farofa is what we eat in Salvador with feijoada. So everybody's going to receive this farofa. And it is a pleasure to have all of you participating. And this year was very hard because of the pandemic. And to move the festival from a live event to a virtual event was very difficult. It's something that I'm learning. I have a lot of help. And I think the panel is something important where people can learn a little bit about each one of you, about your expertise. And so I want to start with Jira, and I want to ask Jira if she can, say a little bit about herself, like not too long, 5 minutes, so we can start.
Hi. Okay. Hi, Sonia. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm honored to be in the presence of such wonderful women, a few I know and the others I've heard about or know by association. I want to give most respect to Sister Janua, because if it wasn't for Janua, I would have never been coming to Brazil and knowing as much as I do about Brazil. So I'm thankful for her guidance and her tours to Brazil, because it was a gateway for me to become involved with the Brazilian community. I've been attending your events for 9 years, I think. I think I was there for the first one and have been there for some of the events throughout all the years. So I have really appreciated the opportunity to connect with the Afro-Brazilian community here in Washington. I started in the music business maybe 40 years ago, maybe 50, I'm not sure, but it's been a while since I first got started. I'm a biomedical librarian by profession, but music and music production is my passion. My interest is cultural and political artists from the diaspora. So I've been actively involved in the music of Jamaica, especially because of its cultural and political content. And over time, with almost every Caribbean artist, whether from Jamaica or not, any Caribbean artist that travels to the States, I've worked on their productions or produced their shows or worked with them. But also artists from home, from Africa. I've worked with many, many artists from Africa over the years, back to Sunny Ade, Salif Keita. Some of them I worked on their very first shows here in Washington and all their subsequent shows here in Washington. Some of them I presented for the first time in DC, like Lucky Dubé, Nasio Fontaine, many, many others, Letet Boulay from Cameroon, and any African artist that was touring in the past 30, 40 years, I have had the opportunity to promote and work with. And of course, coming to Brazil opened a new door in that I was introduced to the music, the culture, the drums, the African energy of Bahia, and it has enriched my life and changed my life. And thanks to Janua, I learned about Iliaye before I reached the shores of Brazil, because she gave me an article on the flight, which became sort of my platform, for working with Afro-Brazilian music. Because once I got to Brazil, I met Iliaye. It just so happened they were coming to America to do a tour. I was able to talk to Vovo, work with Conceição Boaventura, And I was able to produce their first show in Washington, D.C. in 1999. And also a second year in 2000, I think it was 2002, I did a second show here as well. So I'm very proud to have produced Iliaye and to have done, I actually produced their first show here 45 days after I met them. So it was quite an achievement. And I have to thank Janua, Sonia, everybody here was part of that experience. So that's me in a nutshell. You know, I'm open for questions if anybody has questions.
Yes, Tonho Matéria sent a question. He was going to be the moderator of this panel, but because it's an event made for women, and I actually forgot to say that in the beginning, this year the festival is really honor women and the empowerment of women who empower other women. So I told him, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to be the moderator, but he said, I have to ask a question for Jira. And so the question that he had was that when you are producing Bobby Marley, did you feel that you have any difficulty or any discrimination because you were a woman, producing a man? If you have any kind of disadvantage for being a woman?
Well, I mean, not always, but in the beginning, of course, you know, if you know anything about reggae and you know anything about the music business, both are dominated by men. And it was very unusual in the beginning when I first had to learn production. The truth is I wanted to sing, but I don't sing very well. So I had to learn production. I wanted to be somebody who, you know, African music, Caribbean music was not necessarily known or heard in the Black American community. And I wanted to sort of be the impresario for that. And I mean, I wasn't thinking that, you know, I'm a woman and this is going to be difficult. I just felt compelled to do it. So I did. It was difficult in the early days because you were not considered to be backstage unless, you know, you were waiting for your boyfriend. People didn't think you were a producer or somebody who was involved with the production of the show. So there were many difficulties. But working in reggae, it's surprising that it turned out that because as reggae spread to America, there were many, many women and Black women producers throughout the country. Some of them are well known, Makeda in San Diego, Malika Whitney, Karen Mason, Dessa Magoo. There's many, many women who were the backbone of the music. And those are the sisters I collaborated with, I learned from, I worked with, I toured with. And so I got support in that way. There was discrimination, but I overcame it by working with the women.
We're gonna, at the end, we're gonna let the questions for the end. So I wanna jump to Janua. And like I said, she's a very strong figure in DC and someone that I have always looked for and to do this. And it's an honor for me to be here with Janua. I know Janua. I think right the same time that I met Jira, maybe a little bit before through certain friends like Willow Taylor. So I want you to talk a little bit about you, Janua. So you know, let everybody know what have you done in DC and artist and designer here in DC.
Well, am I on?
Yes, you're on.
Oh, good. I can hear you better. Thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate the concept, the idea of this panel, because I do believe and I know within my heart that our time is now as women on the planet. So this gives me an opportunity once again to connect with high-spirited energy, positive, hardworking queens. So greetings to all of you. I've been around for a very long time, producing my own line of Afrocentric clothing, and then on top of that, doing productions. I wandered into the fashion arena because of the lack of presence of us into that field. So I really came out in 1969, believe it or not, producing and wearing and using African models, African American models, and producing my own shows. As a Black American, from the legacy of our ancestors, I felt that there should be an Afrocentric presence in the arts, in the fields of wearable art. That's what I call it. My work in the beginning was called Fashion Infinity Fashions, and I thought it was more than that, and I called it Fashion Revolution, and I thought it was stronger than that. So I went to the concept of regality reality, hailing up the queens. So again, from that time, again, from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and on into the 2000s, I produced a number of shows that. So as a part of that, I was a member of the National Conference of Artists, which is an organization of Black artists. A lot of them are artist educators in the United States. But for 5 years, I was the president of the DC chapter of the National Conference of Artists. As a part of that, I got, we did shows around the country. And in 1988, we got invited to come to Bahia, Brazil. And then Bahia, my spirit was lit. I was so impressed, inspired, grateful that I connected with, and I've traveled to Africa a number of times, but going to Bahia, Brazil was almost like going home in terms of the culture, the arts, and I'm dealing with people that are very similar to us. Like I said, I've been to Africa, from Ethiopia to Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, Morocco, I'm missing something else. But in my travels, going to Bahia was the strongest energy that I felt from our people on the southern side of us. So anyway, through that National Conference of Artists, I've traveled to Bahia 10 times. I've taken over 300 people on various trips to Brazil. And it's been my honor and pleasure to connect with wonderful people such as my sister Dira, who I've known forever. It was a wonderful ambassador in the cultural arts as well, that she is through what she works with, the music industry. And I knew that inviting her to be a part of that would be very a crossroad of the two cultures connecting again. So anyway, through that, like I said, through my 10 trips to Bahia, it's always been not just going as a visitor or whatever, it's been more of a connector, trying to connect the culture in so many ways. We have so many, which I say, similarities in our cultures that I just like to hail up in presence of staying forth with the ancestors. And that's what impressed me most about my trips, that I always felt a connection to our ancestors in being in Bahia. So like I said, it shows itself in the music, the colors, the arts, the food. It's ever present everywhere. And it's been the most beautiful journey and experience for me. So throughout that, like I said, and the people that I've met on these various trips, I can say that a lot of my friends and people that have gone on our trips have gone back several times on their own and connected on their own. So that's why I feel so strong and honored to be a conduit or a connector in that realm. So thank you. That's enough for me for right now.
And there is a quick question that Tony Materia asked me to ask you too. If you feel that, how do you feel the art in general empower women in any way, manner, or form?
Oh, so many ways. Like I made reference to how art inspires women. I think most importantly, it gives us a platform. You can't say that women should not belong in that realm. And as a part of that, like it was expressed, we inspired and connect with each other. We make each other proud and strong on our own. We don't need anybody else other people to tell us where we belong. At this point, we're not having that. So again, art is a wonderful platform to work through if you are a woman that feels she needs to express herself in some way. So it may be through music, like I said. It may be through the fashion, which was the realm I chose. But more importantly, I think that it gave us a voice where there was no voice. Art expressed is such a wonderful, it expresses such a wonderful array of thoughts. And again, just connecting. Like when I met you, Sonia, you were doing your samba dancing, and I remember your group, we invited you to come to the Belmont Arts and let people see some of the connections of Bahia, the culture. And again, Dira since then has been back several times and connected with several musicians in Bahia, and some of them have been here. I remember several years ago, we did a wonderful show. Lazo came and performed and let it out. People had not had an experience like that until that. So each time it's like moving whatever's in the way further back, you know. Through us connecting, I think that's where our power is. The power to see and recognize and assure each other that the path is clear if you want it.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. So, Negra Jo, Miriam gonna translate what you said, mas eu vou lhe fazer essa pergunta. Eu vou fazer essa pergunta em inglês e Miriam vai traduzir, para que as pessoas entendam. Negra Jo is a stylist, is a hairstylist, a dancer, and someone very well known in Salvador, very powerful woman too. So, Tonho Matéria, again, ask the question for you. How, and you ask them, how do you feel you empower women in Salvador? Being a single mother, being a dancer, being a hairstylist, how do your image has empower other women in Salvador? Miriam, você pode traduzir isso para ela.
Negra Jo, tá me ouvindo? Estava me ouvindo? Sônia, você pode repetir a pergunta mais uma vez?
Você está muda, clique que não mute. Você não está lhe ouvindo, você tem que tirar o seu, fazer um mute do seu microfone.
Mute.
Sim, o microfone está mudo.
Eu acho que você pode tirar o mudo dela.
Sonia, I think you can also unmute her from your end.
You can unmute her from your end.
No, we didn't.
Tá me ouvindo agora?
Agora sim. Fala, Miriam.
Sônia, você pode repetir a pergunta mais uma vez?
Pode. Deixa eu ver aqui. Negra Jo, é muito difícil o reconhecimento da mulher no meio da sociedade, né? Sabemos que ainda existem algumas discriminações. Como você se sente sendo uma mulher negra e empoderada? E como você pode empoderar outras mulheres?
Boa noite. Eu sou Negra Jo.
Negra Jo.
E oi.
Ela vai traduzir para você. Então, você fala um pouquinho, para ela traduzir, tá bom?
Assim, eu sou a Negra Jo. E para empoderar as mulheres, eu comecei... Comecei desde criança.
Since I was a child.
Sempre fui discriminada.
I've always been discriminated against.
Mas dentro de mim eu sabia que tinha uma grande rainha.
But inside of me, I knew there was a great queen.
Comecei a trabalhar com cabelos étnicos ainda adolescente.
I started to work with ethnic hair still when I was an adolescent.
E os meus valores eram empoderar outras mulheres.
And my value was to empower other women.
E nisso comecei com alguns cursos,
So when I started with a few courses,
dando valores e autoestima,
giving value and self-esteem,
e falando a história do nosso cabelo étnico, que são os cabelos bonitos.
and telling the story of our ethnic hair, which is our beautiful hair.
E nisso, quando você fala dos nossos cabelos,
So when you start talking about our hair,
eu explico que são os fios fortes que saem dentro de povo negro e ancestral.
I explain that these are strong strands that are coming from Black people and our ancestors.
Nisso, eu começo com um espaço dentro do Pelourinho.
From that point, I start with a space within Pelourinho in Bahia,
aonde a gente propõe às pessoas que se aceite, se ame como são.
where we explain to others to accept themselves as they are.
Nisso, eu tenho os meus cabelos dread.
So that is why I have my Black hair.
Uso o meu turbante, que é a minha coroa.
I also use my head wrap, which is my crown.
Tenho 2 filhos que são dreadlock, Afro Joe e Yalodê.
I do have 2 sons that wear dreadlocks. Didn't quite catch their names.
E procuro levar essa história com firmeza, porque os nossos ancestrais deixou para a gente e temos que levar para o mundo com fortaleza.
And I take this story with strength because our ancestors left it for us, and we have to share it with the world.
Quando você se empodera as pessoas, você forma grupos e lidera.
When you empower other people, you form groups that are leaders.
E diz às mulheres que elas podem transformar.
And tell the women that it can also be transformed.
Porque ser mulher negra de cabelo étnico,
because to be a Black woman with ethnic hair,
não é uma sentença, e sim a nossa essência.
It's not a life sentence, but it is our essence.
Nisso há transformação em valores e autoestima.
So because of it, there is transformation in value and also self-esteem.
Quando eu tenho 6 mulheres dentro do bloco Afleaye, como deusas.
When I have 6 women within the group Ileaye as goddesses.
Sou mulher Olodum há 17 anos.
I am part of Olodum for 17 years.
Aonde com o corpo, com a mente, com o espírito.
Where with body, mind, and soul and spirit.
Que você transforma agradecendo a nossa ancestralidade.
That is how you transform yourself, being grateful to our ancestors.
Eu tenho um espaço no Pelourinho.
I have a space in Pelourinho.
Aonde tem várias mulheres transformadas com seu cabelo valorizado.
Where we have several women that have been transformed with knowing their values of their hair.
Cabelos dreadlock, black, trançados, cabelos naturais.
Natural hair, dreadlocks hair, hairs with braid.
E sempre levando a elas que essa história não tem que ficar dentro de um quarto, com a porta fechada.
Always letting them know that this story does not have to be behind closed doors, with the doors closed.
Temos que passar pelas portas e deixar sempre encostada, porque atrás sempre virá seguidores.
We have to go through the doors and always leave a small opening because right behind there are more people that are going to come.
Então, quando você vê a satisfação de ver os nossos cabelos valorizados com alguns produtos que a gente pode utilizar.
So when you see the satisfactions of our hair and also the products that we can also use.
Com shampoos e cremes apropriados para os nossos cabelos étnicos.
With the appropriate shampoo and creams for our ethnic hairs.
Temos pentes para o nosso cabelo, que são cabelos assim, muito forte, que engrandece a nossa fortaleza.
We have combs that are specific for our hair that also strengthens our being.
E eu vejo que a gente pode transformar, pode mudar, empoderar e dizer que sempre seremos mais fortes se estivermos juntas.
And what I see is that we can transform and we can also empower and know that we can.
E essa história,
with our hair.
E essa história eu aprendi no caminhar da minha vida, no mundo.
And this story I learned with my walk in this earth.
Porque eu perdi minha mãe com 5 anos de idade.
Because I lost my mother when I was 5 years old.
E a minha madrasta queria que eu alisasse o cabelo para eu parecer com uma mulher de epiderme clara. E eu nunca aceitei.
And my stepmother wanted me to straighten my hair so that I could look like a person that could be accepted, but I never accepted to do that.
Porque eu me sinto forte, guerreira e grande com a história ancestral, com meu cabelo cara.
Because I feel strengthened and empowered with my ancestral story of my hair as a Black woman.
Thank you, Negra Jo. This is wonderful. It's a wonderful way of talking about beauty. Very powerful. I want to introduce you to Dee. Dee is a dancer. She's a drummer from DC. And she's going to be asking some questions to Marley. And then she will ask some other questions to Gira and everybody else. Negra Jo and Januar.
Okay. É um prazer para mim encontrar todas as pessoas aqui. Muito obrigada a Sônia para fazer esse evento que é muito importante para Washington, D.C. It's such a pleasure to meet each and every one of you. Thank you again, Sonia, for organizing this amazing event. Esse é um evento que é maravilhoso para as mulheres e também para o afrodiáspora de Washington, D.C. This is a wonderful event for the Afro-diaspora in the Washington, D.C. area, and we're just lucky to have so many amazing panelistas. As panelistas maravilhosas também, muito talentosa também. É incrível que tem essas rainhas aqui. So it's such a pleasure. My Portuguese isn't very strong, so there will be times when I don't understand everything. But gratefully, we have a wonderful interpreter on deck, and I know that it's going to help us have a wonderful discussion this afternoon. Muito obrigada, mais um. Eu penso que os panelistas está muito bom. A volta meu português não é muito forte, mas passo a passo, graças a Deus, para eu entender.
You don't need to. I think we're going to just do English. You don't need to do in Portuguese.
Okay.
And Miriam will translate anything that is in English for Negra Jo. So you can
You got it.
Say English, yes. For the time.
Awesome. Okay, so I guess our next question is then for Marley. And I'm going to have the question in English. So Marley, Bahia is a state that is culturally complete with music. It has music, I think, at some of the widest spectrum of music across the board in Brazil, and is really the root of a lot of manifestations of music in other states in Brazil as well, especially Salvador. So, you know, it's already the capital of music. So, you know, when you're perceiving the forms of music, especially when it comes to percussion, because I'm a drummer as well, and you're looking at the different carnival entities, you know, a part of me wants to say it in Portuguese, que é igual que seu bloco preferido. If you have a preferred bloco, or, you know, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit more about your experience with percussion and music in Bahia, and your experience with the tradition of Carnival, because it's not just a couple of days, it's an entire season, if not a year. So we're definitely interested in your experience, and can't wait to hear more for you. I'm going to shut up now.
Hello, everybody. I wanted to, of course, first thank Sonia for inviting me in this panel. Sharing this panel with the rest of you. I'm very honored and humble at the same time to answer the question that this is Demetrius. Sorry, I want to make sure I pronounce your name correctly.
Oh, don't worry. Everybody just calls me D. And okay. I'm sorry. One moment before you start your answer, Marley, do we need to interpret the question I just asked to make sure that our colleagues speaking in Portuguese understand? Or are we good to go with the answer?
Good question.
I think she asked if you need a translation. No, we understood because she speaks English perfectly. So
in English, exactly.
Okay, beleza. Just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page. Eu quero que todas as pessoas entendam essa pergunta e que é uma oportunidade que entender essa resposta também. Obrigada.
Thank you, Dee, for the question. So, pretty much you're asking me what my favorite bloco is and my experience with the music in Bahia. So I actually been around the Afro-Brazilian and the Bahian culture and music for about 15 years now. When I first got introduced to it, it was like a very instant. I was starting out being a little more serious on the percussion. I'm originally from Colombia, and I already played and danced with my culture since I was little. So when given the opportunity of, I started listening to, music and from Bahia, I became really interested in, I always liked reggae. So about a year later, I heard about a band that was starting in the DC area, and this was in 2007. Some of my drummer friends were like, hey, I know that you like listening, so there's a band starting. And I was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? I had personally never played ashe or samba reggae or anything like that, but I was like, hey, I'm up for the challenge. And I signed up, and a year later, I traveled to Brazil for the first time. And it just felt like, it was weird because I was having a lot of deja vu moments. It felt like I was back home in Colombia, where I'm from in the North Coast is very similar to Bahia. And I feel like I'm obligated. I'm obligated to say that my favorite bloco in Bahia is Cortejo Afro, because Cortejo Afro is our sister band. I play in Batala, so our sister band that pretty much when we have gone and we go weeks before Carnival, they teach us, they immerse us in the culture. I mean, we go to Pirajá to practice outside in the sun. I mean, that's why it felt like very familiar to me, like in Colombia. And I feel like after I'm there for a few days, I'm like speaking Portuguese, and I was like, wait, where is this coming from? And it's just, that's my favorite because of the culture and the connection that we have with the other members and how welcoming they are to us, and they're willing to teach, us non-Brazilians, their music and their culture, and it's just like their energy. Everything is just amazing to me. Outside of that, one time walking around Pelourinho, I see these other, of course, as a woman, I see these women who are just like playing in Pelourinho, and they were just practicing. And it was the first time I saw, experience, particularly women of color, just being so empowered and playing. And that band was Chida. And I was just like, I think I forgot where I was going. I just stopped and I just stayed there for the rest of the afternoon and watched them play. And I started following them around, asking questions, because I wanted to, hey, when are you playing again? Where do you? So for me, those are like my favorite from the, lesser well-known. And of course, there is Ileaye, which is like how I got introduced to samba reggae and Afro-Brazilian music, because I would listen to their music before I actually got to know them. And then when I went to a concert I was just crying. I was like, I couldn't realize. I was like, I can't believe I'm right here right now. And I was just crying. But it was also because I already knew about them before. And it was just a wonderful experience to see them live. I recommend it to everyone who has not experienced this. And then, of course, after that, I kept going back to Brazil and experiencing more and more and more and more. So.
Wonderful. Brazil and Bahia, it is a very powerful place. I want to ask a question for Rafaela Silva. Like Rafaela danced with me samba. She is a carioca. I don't think you've ever been to Salvador, right, Rafaela? Rafaela?
I have been to Salvador for your birthday one year.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, so yeah, that's true. That's true. But the question I want to ask you, as being as a dancer here in DC and in Rio de Janeiro, what are the difference they will see for women of color in terms of cultural empowerment from the United States and from Rio de Janeiro?
I think that because a lot of the women of color in Washington, D.C. were the pioneers, per se, of samba. So samba weren't brought by the European Brazilians to outside of the U.S. Let's just say that. I think when it comes to comparison of Rio, what I've noticed over the years is that because of the rise of these artists, these actresses in Rio that does a lot of the telenovelas, there was all of a sudden we became obsolete in carnival. For example, the queen of the percussion no longer was a Black woman that worked so hard all year round to make that spot. That spot was now being given to these actresses. So it's a way, of course, it was more in a way of capitalism, way of making money. But all of a sudden we disappeared from the TV. The Black woman disappeared from that spot, from that queenship, because it's a queen, it's a title of a queen. As opposed to when I, living in DC, a lot of the women that did do samba or did dance samba were, I would say 97% Black women, but that also began to dissipate over the years as well, because now a lot of the American women that were learning samba, a lot of them were European women, and they began to teach and they began to, and I'm gonna say they began to capitalize on the culture. And after dancing samba for many years, I began to teach samba. And as a teacher of samba, I also saw that in that field too, where a lot of white women were taking over and capitalizing, creating a whole brand out of samba, creating a whole brand out of Brazil. And again, here we are disappearing once more from that something that is ours culturally and not giving credit for it. So what I see is whenever now you're thinking about samba, when you think about samba, our Black woman is no longer the face of it. It's no longer the Black woman that's the face of it. So that's what I've seen in both in DC, living in DC for 34 years, and also seeing that change in Rio and Brazil.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I want to ask Janua and Jira later to comment about that, because both of you guys have been exposed to Brazil and you have been seeing samba. And when I met Janua, there were very few people, especially America, who used to dance samba or do samba here in DC. It's great that we have opened to many other cultures of the society, but what can you comment, Janua, on what Mida just said?
Well, I think she's right on point with the disappearance of us whenever something becomes popular or in vogue or what happened. We are the inspirators, and we must never forget we are the ones who sparked the flame. And we always get pushed to the background to whatever. And I believe she used the term for capitalism's sake, that this is something as we see the city being changed we know how that feels again, using the culture as a stepping stone to whatever the capitalists want to be at that time. So I think, again, being not just a viewer, but somebody who has worked to maintain my position. And I think that's what we do anyway. We have to keep on struggling. I hate using that word. I don't like the word struggle in my vocabulary, but it's always an uphill battle to make yourself known, visible, to be considered a significant part of whatever it is. Now, you're talking about samba, but I've already shifted that concept to other areas. I mean, it's all around wherever our participation is invited. Again, once others catch on, and like she said, they can capitalize off it when we begin to disappear. And that's where the battle always continues. The battle continues. That's who we are. That's what we do. And we will continue to do that. We know who we are. Once we embrace the culture is a living entity. If you don't produce it, live it, use it, it will dissipate. We know that, don't we, sisters? We know that. So we must use it for our good. That's why I'm really grateful to this panel to discuss why the feminine energy is the one that carried forth the seed. So culture is, we can look at it as a seed as well. The feminine energy is what carried forth the seed. And so through that is a spectrum of so many things that can materialize. It's like living the thoughts of, again, as the sister from Bahia, I mean, we live with our ancestors. Once we recognize that and use that force and that energy for whatever as long as we are on the path of something beyond what is told to us, what is recognized, as long as we use it to benefit our people, our strength, then it will continue to give back to us. But we must use it to the most good. And so I think by embracing culture, culture embraces back. So again, that's why the arts and like it's so many spectrums of the arts is very important. So it's not just art for art's sake. That's one thing I'm opposed to. Art for art's sake does not represent us. And that's what they are doing. Art for art's sake for capitalism. So we must take it back and make it real for us.
Dira, do you have anything to add to?
Where's Dira?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm here. Well, I am in 100% agreement. In fact, one of the reasons when I first went to Jamaica, that I really grabbed onto it and embraced it the way I did was because I had seen it, so many things happen with our music, from gospel to jazz to blues. It'd been taken over by whites. Exactly. It's capitalism and it's white supremacy. And they control the medium. They love our music, they love our culture, but they don't love us. And we have to be the impresarios. I felt like if I didn't become knowledgeable about reggae and become somebody who was conversed in the whole culture, that it would be a whole, cadre of white people who would be speaking on behalf of reggae. And in fact, it happened. I couldn't change everything, but in my community, I could be a visible sister, to connect the African American tribe to this Jamaican tribe who was really telling stories about our whole history and our whole culture. And I did it because I wanted to be a Black person who was in the mix and who could speak up and represent the culture properly and bring in other people. So many years ago in America, African Americans didn't really know about other Blacks in other places, even the Caribbean, which is so close. We knew nothing about it. You know, Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball is what we knew about the Caribbean. So we had to learn that, you know, these are not our cousins, these are our brothers and sisters, that the music, the same things that influenced them, their mothers told them the same stories, we heard the same drums, we lived the same rhythms. This is Pan-Africanism. This is, you know, we've got to unite each other. And so January, I think I know, is doing that in her world and has done that beautifully through her fiber art and culture and her connection to the community. I know that you, Sonia, are also doing that. I can see these other sisters are all connected in different ways, from Colombia, from Negra Joe. I love your headband so much. I'm so jealous. But, you know, we are all trying to work for our people. You know, we're trying to represent our people properly because only we can do that.
Exactly.
So it's part of my mission to be out front, to be visible. I didn't know how to do a radio show. I didn't know how to do programs, but I learned because I wanted to talk to my community and I wanted them to connect and join hands. And years ago also, you might be aware that when African artists came and performed in America, the audiences would be 100% white, okay? Why was this? Because white people, of course, traveled, had money, kind of, you know, been to Africa on, you know, cultural excursions, etc. So they knew about these artists, and these artists also were produced by white producers in white venues. And we never actually heard African music. You know, we might have known Hugh Masekela, we might have heard even Milton Nascimento from years ago, but we didn't really hear it in a body that we knew it and knew how to be patrons of the music. So I wanted to be a part of that. And I can say that in DC, that over the years I've been involved, that I have seen the audiences move from being 100% white to being more a majority of Black folks who have embraced and love and support the music from the entire diaspora. So that's a plus.
It's true. And these questions go for Negaju, because the same thing happened in Salvador with the blocos with Carnaval. We do have a Filhas de Gandhi, no? Do they receive the same type of support of a bloco that is mainly made by white people or bands?
Negajô, nos blocos da Bahia, tipo os blocos Gandhi, como é que é o suporte que as mulheres recebem? Existe algum tipo de estigma que elas geralmente passam?
Blocos de mulheres, né? Os blocos de mulheres, como tem as Filhas de Gandhi, por exemplo, né? Esses blocos recebem as mesmas ajudas, né? Dos blocos mistos ou blocos masculinos.
Eu juntamente com as Filhas de Gandhi, nós temos um projeto de valores autoestima.
We have a self-esteem project.
Aonde ensinamos a fazer turbante, trançados e maquiagem.
Where we teach how to put together head wraps, braids, and also makeup.
E a dança Ijexá.
And also the Ijexá dance.
Juntamente com a banda de Dá, que é uma banda feminina.
Along with the female band.
A banda de Dá é criação do nosso eterno Neguinho do Samba, o nosso mestre.
Como é que é o nome da banda de novo, mais uma vez, perdão?
Banda de Dá.
Banda de Dá, só de Dá. Você pode repetir mais uma vez?
E a banda de Dá, nós temos um conjunto de mulheres aonde a gente se reúne para fazer também a dança.
The Jida group, we have a group of women that we get together in order to put together the dance.
A dança, os valores, autoestima.
The value of self-esteem.
A culinária e a maquiagem também.
Culinary and also makeup.
E o empreendedorismo para aprender algumas profissões.
and also entrepreneurship so they can learn some other professions.
Temos também o bloco da capoeira, juntamente com o nosso mestre Tonho Matéria.
We also have the capoeira group with our master Tonho Matéria,
aonde eu venho em uma ala,
where we have this group
com os trançados, a dança, valores e autoestima e ancestralidade.
With a few braidings, values, and also self-esteem, in addition to ancestral.
No bloco Afro Olodum,
the Olodum, the Afro group Olodum,
eu faço parte da escola onde levo para as comunidades os valores da percussão, da dança.
Also, I'm part of the group where I take percussion and the value of it, the value of dance.
E os trançados dos cabelos étnicos, juntamente com as cores nossa as cores do reggae, vamos dizer assim. Né? A gente leva esses valores para as comunidades carentes.
We also take the braiding, also in addition with the colors of the reggae colors, to specific groups that are in need.
Eu faço uma performance ancestral há 17 anos como mãe, mulher, Maria Olodum, em cima do bloco Olodum.
I do an ancestral dance as a mother for the group Olodum. Qual foi a última parte?
É 17 anos que vamos dizer assim, eu faço uma performance em cima do trio.
So she does a performance as for the group Olodum for 17 years as an ancestral performance.
Dentro do bloco Afro Ileaie.
Within the Ileaie group.
Eu tenho 6 rainhas e 6 princesas.
I have 6 queens and 6 princes.
São meninas normais, que nós temos a visão biônica, pessoas normais.
They're normal girls.
E transformamos em deusas.
Where we transform them into goddesses.
Eu tenho uma história dentro do bloco Afro Ileaie.
I have a history within the Afro group Ileaie.
5 rainhas, 5 anos consecutivos.
5 queens for 5 consecutive years.
98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002.
98, 99, 2000, 2001, and 2002.
E esses valores eu também deixo dentro da minha família.
And these values I also leave within my family.
Com vizinhas e amigos.
With neighbors and friends.
Empoderando e direcionando.
Empowering and also guiding.
Eu também tenho trabalho dentro do bloco Afro Bancoma.
I also do some work within the Afro group Bancoma.
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 É o único bloco que não é de Salvador. Ele é do interior.
It's the only group that is not. It's the only group that is not from the city of Salvador. It is from the countryside.
Pronto. E a gente trabalha também com essa linha de valores, autoestima, culinária e a estética afro. É o nosso cabelo, valorizar o cabelo negro. A minha história é valorização do cabelo negro, empoderar e direcionar.
My history is to empower. My work is to empower the ethnic hair. We also work with braiding, with makeup, but that is the work they're doing, empowering to our ethnic hair.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nigga. It's one thing that she said very, very quickly. That she said that I like, she said that they work in with the bionic eyes, where they transfer regular women and goddess. That is wonderful, right? Because everything's here, how you think, you know? Yeah, that is wonderful. Go, Jill. Sorry.
Sonia, can I interject? That's exactly what my work has been about for the past 45 or 50 years, actually, was to take the ordinary sister that wasn't a runway model. We have so many beautiful sisters in our communities, So I would ask anybody who was stage worthy, stage presence, that had a stage presence, to put on my garment, and they would definitely transform and definitely be turned into the concept of queens, but to see ourselves in a higher light. And that's been the auspices of my work from day one. I've done 2 shows. I have done 2 shows, I did rather, in Bahia, Brazil, and I did 2 shows in West Africa. And most recently, I've taken my shows to Havana, Cuba, working with the Black Cuban sisters. And you're talking about, again, taking, again, our legacy, our history and culture, and that has become a stepping off point for the work. So the last shows that I did were in Havana, Cuba. And so thank you for that, sister, because I'm on the same energy realm as what she was speaking of. Absolutely.
Actually, Sonia, before I ask my question, because we're talking about the transformative power of the arts that these women engage in, let's extend that across the board. The other sisters who haven't had a chance to talk about the transformative power of their art form, please share. I mean, we've got a little bit of time, but I think this is a really rich vein. And like Sonia said, it's that moment when you're in here, you transform from, you know, to your goddess self. So I definitely want to hear the other panelists talk about the transformative power of the art that they engage in. I just heard somebody's mic go off. Was that you, Marley, or was that one of the other panelists?
Yeah, I was gonna go, but so for me in the music, particularly in the drumming, coming from Latin America, the women are not necessarily ever the drummers. When you are in a group, women are always the singers, the dancers, which is great. However, that other part of even being in the same band has never been welcoming to us. So for me, as an example, I wanted to learn, you know, I played in bands and everything, but I wanted to learn the drumming and I was never allowed. And then the other stories I hear is sometimes women are not taken seriously, so they don't really teach us because this is too hard for you, you're not gonna learn. So a lot of women feel discouraged sometimes to even go that route. I personally felt that way when I decided that I wanted to be a better, you know, more of an actual percussionist a few years, like 15 years ago. And to me, joining a band was a big deal, as much as well as it was for the other women. And I am now, of course, I was one of the founding members, so now I am one of the teachers as well. And I always make sure to empower other women by teaching them without dumbing things down, because I want them to feel empowered. They can do it. You know, this is hard, but it's gonna be, you know, it's not easy, but you can do it. And we're not gonna play the dumb versions of anything. We're not gonna play the dumb versions of drumming. We're going to do actually even better. I mean, female drummers, I like some of the best drummers around that I've met happen to be women. And the same thing is happening in Colombia. Like now, I personally became empowered throughout all the years with Bataladisi and performing and going to Brazil and then seeing Banda Dida and seeing some of the women in the Queens in LA. I became very empowered to start my own project, my Afro-Colombian and Afro-Indigenous project, which is like really my roots. And this is like, I know this music and I can teach it. And because of everything that I've experienced with Batala, I felt very empowered to do that. 3 years ago, I co-founded a group. My other group is called La Marvela, and it comes from the Latin word marvelous. And it also happens to be the combination of the names of the founders, which is, we felt like that was very, it was like, oh yes, this is our name. And the same thing, I mean, we practice hard, we work hard, and I make sure that I teach the percussion all around. And it's the same thing. I'm I don't dumb down versions. I don't teach and let me give you a modified version, because it's always that belief that maybe women are not going to be able to do it, or like especially with hand drums that, oh, our hands are soft. No, we can do it. We can play. This is how we can do it. So it's that belief. And I see the change on both groups, from the women from the time they start and how they're a little shy about hitting the drum. And then at the end, they're like, in Batala in particular, we started with mostly Latin and Brazilian women at the time when the band started, but it has now become about 90% American, of women who have never heard or listened to Brazilian or Latin music or known the beat, which is very different. And I see the change from being a little shy into becoming like, people want to become masters in their percussion and their drum, and then they learn other drums. And that's, to me, one thing that's very empowering, and it makes them more confident. All of a sudden you decide that you want to go for that job. You want to go and do things that it's outside of the arts. Like it empowers you and just motivates you to go for what you really want, because you were able to learn and play that drum.
I definitely understand that one. I think drums and music are amazing in their ability to open people up. And once you're open, you're ready for transformation. You're ready to take that next step. But it does take opening up. It takes courage. And I think that's the other thing that all of you sisters have shown, is an amazing amount of courage. It takes courage to change. It takes courage to learn. It takes courage to share. And it takes courage to take your power. Because you're going to have people who are going to tell you, yeah, you're a woman. Why are you playing a hand drum? You're a woman. Why don't you let a man run your business for you and take over your accounts? You're a woman, you don't have to do that. Let a strong man take on that for you. And it takes courage. It takes courage to be transformed into that queen, into that teacher. And it takes courage to share, because there are people who are going to discourage you when you first start. But I think, as Sis Tompkins was talking about, you gotta want to be at the table, be there and say it. I'm gonna be here at the table, and I'm gonna take my training wheels off as I go along, but I'm not going to be silenced and said I can't do this. So I think it takes a lot of courage to be transformed. But you guys have, it's amazing how you have pursued that transformation and help uplift others to be transformed as well. Actually, you hit on, Marley, hit on a point that we were going to next, which is what it's like to work in an atmosphere that's so male dominated. And in music, when it comes to percussion, I think you guys are pretty aware about how male dominated it is, just as Sonia was talking about. The differences you see in how the groups are treated, if it's a women's group or a group predominantly led by women, what they get is different from what the guys get. Do you get that 8 o'clock slot? Do you get the prime time slot, or do you get like the 4 o'clock slot when nobody's watching? What are you getting? So I think that's another thing that is definitely a topic ripe for discussion amongst those groups. So please feel free to contribute your experiences on participating in male-dominated areas, especially leadership, and especially when you're the person that's not just a pretty mouthpiece, but you're the person who's the decision maker in the group.
Yes, I want to comment on that. I guess I'm a vivid example. When I planned the festival, there was something who came to my mind because I want to bring some of the Bahia music, in the culture to DC. I went once to the Smithsonian Folk Festival, and I'm talking about 15 years, almost 20 years ago. And I was like, well, it would be great if I have Timbalada playing here, if I have Ilea Olodum, how can I do that? So that stuck to my mind. And when I had an opportunity and I started planning about the festival, people thought I was crazy, and There is a saying who say you need a crazy person to agree on a crazy idea. And I found that, and I found that crazy person, which was Mestre Cobra Mansa, you know, the one who owns the capoeira Fica. And I went to Cobra Mansa, he said, yes, that is a great idea. So he gave me all this scenario, how can I do all this help and planning. And that was the first festival Afro Bahia. I had no idea. As a dancer, I know a little bit about planning and theater, but not to really plan a festival. And I had no money. I used my own money, I took money from my savings, and I was able to bring 25 people from between Salvador, Australia, and United States. It was painful, and I think Jira, I actually contacted Jira. She helped me, ask for promotion. But the idea was to have only one festival, only the one. But after you do the first one, you feel like, I want to do better, you know? And you have more people asking you, what are you going to do? And I have more people asking to help. And I did the second one, the third one. And then I have people coming to me and say, why don't you have a white male helping you doing this? I think if you have a man, you know, that's going to show more respect. And I say, why? Why do I need a white man to help me doing something that is from my culture, I created? That doesn't make any sense. What kind of respect are you talking about? Maybe you have an issue with respecting women. So I have had an issue for a long time with people telling me that I have to have a man running the festival so the festival can be successful. And it doesn't make any sense, you know, because that was my idea. Now, the only thing that I need is money, right? Is support, financial, and I'm doing without money. So people have that vision that women should not be doing things in leadership because, you know, maybe we're supposed to be in the kitchen cooking or taking care of kids. So, but that it is sad, and I think what we need to do is to continue to do it, you know, and prove that we're capable of doing it. And you know, if I could do it, a festival, because if you think about it, it's not a one-day festival. It's not a Brazilian day. It's a 4 days event. And where we have music, dance, performance, you know, panel. It is, I mean, if you want, like you put the bionic thought in your mind and you can do it. And I mean, I want Miriam to talk a little bit about that because she's also a leader. She has empowered a lot of women. And she may have some to add to this point.
I definitely want to add to it, especially when you talked about, you know, that everybody thinks you need a man to get ahead or to do anything that's going to be of any value or anything activated. One thing I've learned in life is that our actions are an activation. We don't have to think about the how. We just got to do it. And everything else is going to play itself out. My experience was a recent experience that I've had. I'm a digital mixed media artist. So I create art in the digital world. So when I began it as a hobby per se, I just started doing it. And, you know, I forgot that my dad was a fine art painter. So I was carrying it in my DNA, but I began to put these things together. And one day someone saw, I'm like, wow, this is really great work. You should really put yourself out there. And of course, you know, I'm thinking I'm waiting for some sort of permission. So as I began my trajectory with my art and creating, and this was about a month and a half ago, when this artist sold his digital art for $70 million. As an NFT, as a cryptocurrency. And so, you know, and I'm telling this story because I want to talk about activation, you know? So I remember saying, what is NFT? I don't know what the heck that is, but I started doing some research, you know, didn't really quite understand it, but I'm like, I'm going to create an account anyway. I'm going to upload my art in there anyway. I still don't understand. If you were to ask me to explain, I'm going to have a hard time explaining how it actually works. But I put it out there. And I remember a man, you know, said, well, who is going to buy that? You know, who is going to buy that? And this is a world that is dominated by 20-some-year-olds white males. And here I'm a 48 old woman, Black woman, has no idea what an FT is, but has uploaded her artwork as an FT, created a crypto wallet. Here we go, put it out there in the universe. And I've sold 2 pieces already. So people are gonna come and they're gonna say what you need. I always believe that we're energy. As an energy healer, we are energy, and everything that we put out there, everything that we do, any action that we take, we're activating that energy, and that is vibrating within your mile radius of your world. And somebody, somewhere, it's going to see, and it's going to take that action, and it keeps going, and keeps going, and keeps going. And everything that I've done in my life, and I've done a lot of things, from being a dance teacher, I'm a life coach, there are different things I've done. I've never needed the permission of a man to do what I do. Period. I've always believed that if I take an action, somehow things are going to fall into place and things are going to happen. And one of the things that I also want to, just give, I admire Sonia so much, because she's been doing this thing for so many years. And I've seen a lot of the stories. I've seen a lot of the back end stories. And I really applaud her, because this is her 9th year, and there's a special number 9 there, her 9th year doing this. It doesn't matter, COVID is here, but we're still gonna keep going with the festival. So I really want to applaud what it looks like, what tenacity, and having that courage, and having that, this is my purpose. This is what this is. And no matter what people say and people talk, I'm going to continue to do. And this, to me, I applaud that, and I honor you, for always making sure that this is always happening every single year. So that's what that powerful woman and, woman empowerment looks like. To me, it's a great example of woman empowerment.
Thank you.
I think that, that says so much about the importance of having women have discussions like this amongst ourselves about what we're experiencing. Sharing that experience, sharing what we're doing right now is so important. I think where I work, when I work my other job, one of the most powerful tools to disorganize a team is to build what they call stovepipes. And a stovepipe happens when one person is working on one thing and somebody else is working. And as long as you can keep them not talking, and as long as you can keep them not collaborating, you can have so much control and manipulate so much of the environment around, as long as people aren't talking. So, and it's strange, because you would think after years of understanding the empowerment, the power of cross communication on cross-cutting issues like women in leadership, like the transformative power of arts, like the importance of embracing our physical being, whether it's hair, nails, skins, all of these cross-cutting issues. But it's kind of like the first and easiest tactic that you see happen is just keep them stovepiped. Don't let the Latinas talk to the Black women. Don't let the Caribbean Black women talk to the Brazilian Black women. Don't let these guys talk. Just keep them all stovepiped and believing that there's no cross-cutting string that binds them. And you can manage to do that, then all of that power, all of that leadership, all of that energy will just be bottled up. And it's funny, like what you guys are doing, I wish we would do in so many other platforms, because it is one of the hardest things to do. What Sonia's doing is one of the hardest things to do. Bringing people together seems easy. It's not. It's not in the least bit easy. Guys, I did want to give you an opportunity to ask questions amongst yourselves as well. Oh, I'm sorry, I hear somebody talking.
I just want to add one more thing, Dee. Acknowledge all the women here as well. I think when we position ourselves in a position of leadership, whatever it is that our role is in its art form, we're creating a space that other women can follow. When we're being true to what we bring to the table and being true to ourselves and taking that position of leadership. And that's how we don't even have to say much. All the other women will see and they will follow. And they'll become other leaders who are going to lead other people. So I think when we do take our place in leadership as Black women, we're creating a space so other women can also say, I can go do that too and be myself and do what Sonia's doing, do what, you know, Marley's doing, and Dira and everybody else. That's what we're doing. We're creating a space so that they can also follow what, you know, as we become ancestors. At one day we're going to become ancestors, and so that they can now remember us and say, here's what they did, and we're going to continue. So just wanted to add that part.
No, you're right. We're holding space. We're holding space for that next generation. That's said exactly as is. So I was going with that was, I want to give you all an opportunity to ask your own questions, because I know we've been kind of throwing the questions at you, and I'm sure you're curious about what views and ideas and experiences your fellow panelists have. So questions, are there any questions I see head shaking in here, so I'm going to head and pause and mute myself and allow for you sisters to ask some questions.
Sorry, before the questions start, I wanted to add something else to say about, you know, what Rafaela said that was very important, and I wanted to touch on that. You know, with the band, the Batala band, we was first started. We are like a chapter of many other bands around the world. Oddly enough, it went from Brazil to Europe, France, because our mestre, our creator, founder, he moved to France and he started band. And but the one here in the US was started by a woman, and we were the first band that was started and led and completely on the entire leadership and the founding was done by women. And we were the first band in the US, and now there's other bands in other cities in the US. And our leader, her name was Solange. She knew she wasn't going to stay here forever. So she started the band with in mind that she was going to create leaders as well to lead the band, and kept it going. And we are the oldest band and the first band in the US, 14 years, and about to have our 14th year anniversary. And also, you know, the question about how we're treated by men sometimes in a male-dominated. In the case of drumming, in the case of Batala, we're very fortunate to have our mestre. His name is Giva Gonçalves. He is a very supporter of women and supportive of other women starting bands. And when he comes, you know, we call it the Giva Week. He comes for a week and gives us workshops. And really, I mean, he really goes hard on teaching us. And he doesn't care about, oh, you're women, you're not going to break your nail. No, he's not. If anything, I feel like he has us place us in a higher position of, you know, like, you guys are capable. And I think that's something very important that I don't see in other bands. I've been in bands where I'm only the only female, and the male counterparts have not been the same. They don't treat us as equals, you say. But in the case of Batala, we've been very fortunate that we have this, you know, this person who's like, yes, women can do it all.
Yeah, Giba is wonderful. He comes to the festival every year and has supported me any way possible. We have 10 more minutes, and I want to ask each one of you, starting with Dira, a device for women in your area, each one of you, you know, what they could do, what they should do, so they can be empowered, they can empower other women.
I think they just need to stand up and take their place, follow their hearts. We're living in a time, I mean, when so many truths are out now and people we understand who we are. You know, 10 years ago, all of us from different places wouldn't even be connected, wouldn't know each other. But now we can see these queens, these empresses emerging everywhere with that natural hair and their natural beauty and their raffia. And one of the things that inspired me most was, you know, in Iliae, the way the women adorn themselves and present themselves. At Carnival, as the the goddess, you know, the Black goddess, and the graceful way they dance. It's not sexual. It's just, you know, it's ancestral. It's just so beautiful. And those are the things that guide me. When we see other women stepping forward, stepping up, and it's not just in the arts and culture. If you look around, it's everywhere. In the sports, in business, and science, women are taking leads everywhere. So there's no excuse to follow your dreams and to be who you really feel you are. The barriers are still there, but they're not as many. And you have so many examples of women doing things and making decisions and being powerful that the world is ours now. Our reign is coming. Our time is now. And we just have to help other ones. And I think when you're in a position of leadership, we're more sensitive to other women, to other sisters. When I book festivals and have to book a stage, I have to make sure that there are women on the stage, that their performance, the men who are stage managers and have other responsibilities might not think that way, but no, we have to have women up front. We have to have women making decisions. And so when you're in a position when you can make decisions is how you can pull all the others through, like Sojourner Truth. Come on, you know, just come with me. And I think it's happening. You know, just looking at all of you on the screen is just so enlightening and encouraging. I feel so great, you know, because sometimes we don't always see ourselves out there. Some of our sisters have all kinds of crazy hair and blonde hair and are dressing like, not quite like queens, okay? And so we do have a lot of work to do because we've got to get to that where we respect each other, we love each other, and we can look each other and say, yes, queen, I see you. That's it.
Genoa?
Yes. Well, I would say, I think as a leader in the fields, whatever field it is, it's very important. Like someone said, that we know that we're not going to be able to do this forever. Legacy, leave your legacy. Now that we're in the digital age, like I was telling Dira for years and years ago, she needs to write a book. But now that we're in this age that we are, there should be a documentary on this sister. For, I know over 20 years, she led, has it been 20 years at least? She did a festival every year honoring Bob Marley. Now that's something that should be recognized and as a part of her book, as someone who personally knew Bob Marley and respected for her work with Bob, and well, we can call him Bob, man. But again, she has a strong, beautiful legacy that needs to be documented. So again, whatever field you sisters are in, as you get to my point, like I said, I've been doing the work for over 50 years. I started in 1969. I've traveled the world. I've so many people have come in contact with, shared my work with, and I wish I could show you some of my fashion, but this is not the time. But again, my point is that I want to leave some kind of manifestation that I did the work, I was here, I made a contribution to the culture. And again, as I heard a one time in a song, I'm not leaving until I make my contribution. So I think it's very vital and important that we think along those lines as we move along and deal with the things that we have to deal with, like you're saying, strong men kind of trying to move you out of the way, or some Eurocentric concepts trying to water down. Like, I like what you're doing, but you need to be not so loud with it. And that means visually or what have you. So I think a part of the work is leave your legacy in some form and also pass it on to the next generation. That's what my work is about now. I'm in contact with, and I call younger people, my youngins are in their 30s. 40s, those are my youngins now. And that's who I want to pass the work on to. And as I do that, my goddaughter is Nabasha Day. I don't know how many of you know her. It's a strong singer from the group that was Fertile Ground, but she's now doing something called Above Ground. And I really support her efforts. Again, somebody in their 40s who worked with young, disadvantaged young people in Baltimore. So again, you pass it on to the next generation. So as they say, each one teach one. let's continue to do that work.
Marley, briefly, because we have 5 more minutes. Your advice for women who want to be a drummer?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Advice for women who want to be drummers: just do it. Don't be afraid. I feel like that's the first thing that we're afraid that, oh, maybe we can't do it. We're not going to look right. We're not going to do it right. We're not going to hit as hard as a guy is going to hit. No, that's a lie. You just have to do it. And I have a saying. I saw it somewhere, and I just kept saying it's like another woman doing it is not your competition. It's just proof that it can be done. So don't be intimidated for, my one teacher for when I started doing my Colombian, especially was a little more intimidating on that end because that is my culture and I understand the culture and I understand how the males are. And I have asked other male teachers to teach me and then they wanted to teach me. And I saw this other woman who was playing and I reached out to her on Facebook. And I mean, she's like won festivals. We had drumming festivals and she's won festivals. And I reached out to her and I say, hey, I really want to learn this. I cannot find a teacher. Would you teach me? And she said, let's do it. And she's like, it's same thing. It's like, it's not going to be easy. Just do it. But you have to want to do it and encourage other women to, bring in play. And if that's what the instrument is calling out to you, just don't be afraid to do it.
Yes. So in your device, they have for women who really want to do what they want to do. Women can be whatever they want to be. So in your device for that.
Questions for me?
Okay. She's in real time.
And it's not raining here all of a sudden. My only advice is from a quote that I've seen a long time ago and has been with me forever. Take the first step, even if you don't see the whole staircase. Because we get to create the staircase. That's the cool part about it. And so, take that first step. Don't worry about the how. Everything, it's going to fall into where it needs to fall. Don't be afraid to try new things. You don't have to be just one thing. This idea that we have to be one thing, focus on one thing at a time as you're doing it, but you can be so many different things in this world. And so I would say, just take that first step. That's all you need, taking that first step.
Essa pergunta para você. Se você tem algum conselho para as mulheres de Salvador que querem serem artistas, em qualquer área que seja, qual é o seu conselho para elas?
Primeiramente, tem que acreditar em si.
First of all, you have to believe in yourself.
Para ser artista, para ser, eu digo diferente, você tem que acreditar, tem que estudar.
So you have to be an artist, you have to believe in yourself, you have to study.
A humildade antes de qualquer coisa.
Humility before anything.
E ter a consciência de que tem que diariamente
and to have the conscience that you have to daily
e comemorar a nossa liberdade ancestral.
To celebrate our ancestral freedom.
Eu não digo nem só as mulheres de Salvador.
Not just the women from Salvador.
As mulheres do mundo.
Women of the world.
Porque nós somos a comunheira da casa.
Because we are the first ones in the house.
Nós é que geramos.
We are the ones that generate.
Nós é que parimos.
And we're the ones that give birth.
Então a mulher tem a força de liderar.
So we have the power to lead.
E ser grandes empreendedoras.
And to be great entrepreneurs.
E poder passar essa história.
And to be able to share this story.
Sendo uma grande maestra.
Being a great teacher.
E para você está numa área, você tem que entender para você cobrar.
In order for you to be in a certain area, you have to understand in order for you to charge.
E é uma maneira também de fortalecer
It's a way of strengthening
essa nova geração que está chegando agora.
this new generation that is coming.
Eu falo sempre que
I always
nós
say
estamos aqui agora nesse bate-papo grandioso,
we're here now in this great conversation
porque teve gente que chegou na nossa frente e limpou o terreno para a gente encontrar quase limpo.
because there were people that came before us that came and actually prepared the space for us to be here today.
Tenho grande certeza
I'm so sure
que outras pessoas, principalmente as mulheres,
that other people, especially women,
quando vir esse bate-papo, essa live, esse encontro,
when they hear this conversation, this live, this gathering,
tenho certeza
I am sure
que muitas irão mudar de opinião como viver em um mundo como o nosso.
they're going to change their opinions on how to live in a world as ours.
Precisamos de mais Sônias.
We need more
Sônias.
Sonias.
Precisamos de mais mulheres como Dira, como você que está me traduzindo.
We
Como
need more
essas
women
mulheres.
and a woman like you that is translating. We need more of these women.
Esse grupo de mulheres aqui, eu tenho certeza que é uma maneira de mudar.
This group of women, it's a way of change.
Uma maneira de mudança aonde nós estamos falando de nós.
It's a way of change in an area where we're talking about us.
Então, vamos juntas seguir e
So
dizer que juntas seremos mais fortes.
So let's continue together, and together we will be stronger.
Okay. Yes. G, I want you to give, we have like 3 more minutes so you can put your inputs and then I will close out.
So my input is that Sonia should give her input.
No, I want you to tell us your advice. You're a dancer, you're a drummer, your advice for women.
My advice for women, it's going to sound a heck of a lot like what you've been hearing before. Step out there, put your nose to the grindstone, put your nose in a book. You're going to have to work hard for it. There is a double standard, probably means you're going to have to work even harder for it. But the satisfaction that you get from pursuing and achieving what calls out to you as a passion and what you know you can do, you'll surprise yourself, you'll surprise others, and you do get a great deal of satisfaction. So my advice is, don't stop pursuing it, don't stop learning. The only constant is change. So don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid of that transformation. And that's it. That's probably enough.
Yes. I'm very proud of us, I was so tense and so afraid to do a panel. I have never really put a panel together. And it's that you have to believe in yourself. Believing is everything. If you think you're capable of doing it, you're gonna do it. You just have to be a little crazy and say, I'm doing it, and believe in yourself. You have to put your feet there. Before anything, you have to think in the present. I am doing it. Because if you say, oh, if I do, no, I'm doing it, it's positive, it's gonna happen. Always think positive, be calm. Like today we have an issue with some panel who could not use Gmail. Okay, let's do another platform. But when you think positive, when you have that peace of mind and the trust on yourself, everything is possible. And if you believe in yourself, everybody will believe. Right? So if I can do this festival without any financial resource or any kind of knowledge, experience, you can do anything. And maybe Dad and I can play the next festival about reggae. Salvador is big in reggae too, right? Why not? Why not you do a reggae festival Afro Bahia? That would be wonderful. Bringing some reggae singer from Salvador to DC. Huh? Let's think about that. So I want
a couple of them.
Yes, it would be wonderful. We can, stop writing for grants and see if we can do that. But I want to thank you, everyone, all of you guys for participating. You guys make me stronger, and like I say, I was led by John White, Jira, and Agahia for these two wonderful women who have been in my life. Thank you so much, Miriam. We danced together. Miriam met me when I got here. I didn't even speak any English. I still need to learn more English. I still don't speak well, but I had nothing when I got here. Marley, thank you so much for helping. Negra Jo, I know Negra Jo, we never really met in person, but I knew Negra Jo from Salvador. Now we are good friends, right? So, muito obrigado, Negra Jo, por participar. Você realmente adicionou muito para esse panel, com sua sabedoria, sua inteligência e sua força. Okay? Muito obrigado. E thank you, everyone, for participating. Axé.
Você é maravilhosa.
Oh, thank you.
Você tem luz, você tem vida.
Muito
você é uma pessoa especial, você é uma pessoa grande.
Obrigada.
Você reuniu 7 mulheres, cada um no seu estilo, no seu ritmo, e deu tudo certo. Eu, sem falar inglês, entendi quase tudo.
Oh, see, she said she didn't speak English, but she understood almost everything that we said. That is wonderful.
E Miriam,
Miriam,
uma doçura. Miriam, uma linda, uma fofa.
Yes.
Misericórdia.
So we're talking about the power of women from the deusas, the goddess of the candomblé, no? So we all have some of those goddess, no? So axé for everybody. Thank you so much.
Obrigada, Sônia.
Bye.
Obrigada, Sônia. Thank you.
Obrigada so much, Sônia.
Obrigada.
E a história que eu contei para ela é a história da Yalodê, né? Ela me perguntou, o que é Yalodê? Yalodê é uma palavra em Yoruba, uma palavra nagô, que significa uma mulher importante, a mulher mais importante do lugar. Então, numa aldeia, tinha uma Yalodê, o nome dela era Dona Oxum, e a Yalodê andava olhando o que era que estava acontecendo na sua comunidade. E ela olhou e fez assim, mas essa minha comunidade está muito pobre. Está muito pobre, olha quanta coisa que está faltando aqui. Está faltando quase tudo. E olhava assim, não, eu vou resolver isso. E saiu sozinha. E disse, eu vou ao Palácio do Rei. E chegou no Palácio do Rei e ela disse, olhe, minha comunidade está passando mal, minha comunidade está com dificuldade. E o senhor aí, vivendo nesta riqueza, não, o senhor precisa fazer alguma coisa por minha comunidade. O rei nem ligou, nem deixou ela entrar. Ela ficou, falou, mas ela estava sozinha. Ela disse, é assim, eu vou voltar para minha comunidade. E chegou na comunidade, ela começou a chamar as mulheres, as crianças. Chamava uma por uma, mas não era assim. Ela chamava cantando, porque africano faz tudo cantando, dançando, né? Seja o que for. E aí ela foi cantando. Aê, Yalodeia, oh Yalodeia, oh Yalodeia. E fui cantando e fui chamando. E foram juntando muitas vozes. Muitas mulheres, muitas crianças. Até chegaram no Palácio do Rei. E lá no Palácio do Rei, ela também não parou para falar mais nada. Fez um xirê. Xirê significa festa também nessa língua iorubá. E elas foram fazendo uma roda, né? O xirê é uma roda, é cantar rodando, dançando. Cantando e dançando. Mas ajuntou tantas vozes que ficou muito forte no ouvido do rei. E elas cantando. E cantou uma manhã, cantou uma tarde, cantou uma noite, cantou outra manhã. E o rei começou a se agoniar com aquela cantiga ali o tempo todo. E ele não aguentou. Quando ele não aguentou mais, chamou o ajudante do rei e disse: quer saber de uma coisa? Manda Dona Oxum entrar com todas essas mulheres e pegar aqui dentro do palácio tudo que elas precisam para ficar muito bem. Aí elas entraram, mas entraram ordeiramente, não foi assim. E foram retirando da casa do rei tudo o que eles precisavam, tudo que elas estavam precisando. Juntou tudo, finalmente dividiu tudo certinho com a sua aldeia. E por muito tempo não faltava nada na aldeia de Dona Oxum. Elas foram todas juntas, viu?